I now call this committee of the whole meeting of the Davenport Community School Board of Directors to order. Our first item is our ISB workshop. So, let me turn it right over to them.
Absolutely. Well, I just kind of want to tee it up a little bit. President Goza and Vice President Hayes, myself, we meet regularly with these two human beings that are on a computer screen and only exist in computer land. And they're here with us in person today. And it is so fantastic for you to be here in person. We really appreciate you making the trip to Davenport. And I know that you guys have been instrumental in helping guide our school board as we move through a pandemic year, so it's much appreciated. So I know that we've got some boardsmanship workshops that we're going to be doing today. For purposes, if you've got to get up and walk around, I'm sure that microphone will work, but there's a button to push right here, and really about a 6-inch proximity to that thing will allow the online people to hear you. So Lou Ann and Harry Heilenthal are with us from IASB today, and we're so thankful to have you guys join us today. So thank you for being here. Dan and Linda, would you like to add anything to that?
I thought Linda was going to jump in, but I can. No, they've been a huge resource. I enjoyed attending all the extra webinars and everything else because I always have a lot of takeaways, and I always get put on the spot for where we've been and where we are now. So it's a good thing to be, I guess, a good example versus a bad example. So I do greatly appreciate all the resources, as well as Patty Schroeder helps out, Siobhan, and I cannot remember the new gal in the legal department. Tammy. Perfect. But no, tremendous resources helped us a lot. I think we've came a long way from where we were. So thank you all again. And Vice President Hayes, if you had anything you wanted to add.
Actually, we had spoke when they were coming in, and I told them how much we appreciate them being here and how much we appreciate Harry for sharing his retirement with us. So just again, I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done and that you continue doing to assist the district.
Thanks. We're delighted to be here, and yes, it's grandchildren time coming up in a couple months. So here's what we have teed up. So if you just take a quick peek, that fine looking, it looks like it could almost be professionally printed font, doesn't it, on your chart paper? Not quite. But some major tenets. This isn't everything, but key chunks, as Lou and I reflected back on our work and things we draw on for effective governance, which that's your role. Clear, ambitious goals. So we're going to reflect back on the goals you have set with a couple of guiding questions. Another critical piece is information flow, which supports you in making the best decisions possible as a whole board, as well as shaping your individual views. And in that third area, and it's a balance, accountability and support. When an organization is heavy accountability and not the support, that has pluses and minuses to it. When an organization is focused more heavily on support, and the accountability piece is not enough, that's problematic for an organization. So the balance between those two, and that's what we're after. So the frame for tonight should reflect as we look back on tools you have used. And Linda mentioned this tonight before, and she had said something previously about our role. She commented to Luann and me that one of our roles is put suggestions out there. And what we're looking for with suggestions, because we recognize we don't live here, we're not your board, we're not your district, we're a support organization. But what we're constantly watching for is where do suggestions, strategies, techniques take hold? Who takes stock and really works to get those embedded in their work as board teams? And those, it's not by any accident, that's where board teams get traction. When they take the things that are talked about, prioritize them, and really get after them. So hopefully that's a sense that you'll see through tonight. And we're doing our best to have this as interactive as we can, and we're delighted to be here in person as well. So, Lou, let's do the goals piece first, please.
Thank you, and I believe that Bruce is joining us digitally, virtually, is that right? We can't see him? Okay, but Jamie has not joined us yet, so you'll let us know, Jess? Thank you.
I'm here.
Hi, Bruce. It's good to hear you. So
It's
we're gonna,
good to almost see you.
we have legs, we
Now
have
I
bodies.
see you. There you are. Okay.
Thank you.
Now we know how you feel when you watch us virtually all the time. We get it. Okay.
It's like the wizard. So, as Harry said, we're going to look at some of your core documents, and one of the first ones that we're going to look at is on page 2 of your packet, and those are your Davenport Superintendent Board goals that you set for 2021. And as Harry mentioned, it's important to keep these goals up front and center. So we're just going to do a quick activity where we're going to ask you a couple questions. But I'm going to have in a moment, going to get into groups of 3, 2 groups of 3. And the voice from beyond, Bruce, you'll just be doing some reflection on your own, and then we'll ask you to share out as well. We're going to ask you, and you're going to have 2 minutes, and we're going to ask you the question, we're going to have you in small groups look at your goals and then talk about where your district has made headway. Where have you seen some real progress on your goals? We've got the long-term goals, and then you've got your short-term goals on page 2. Harry's going to do some tallying in just a minute. So let's have you get into your groups of 3. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I'm going to play some Jeopardy music. At the end of that time, be ready to share out what goals that you feel like you've made headway on. Okay? 2 goals each, where you've made some progress this last year. Thank you. Okay. Give you about another half a minute. You guys ready to share? You guys ready?
They're still in deep conversation up there.
We asked for 2, so we'll see if there's 3 of them.
Okay, let's have you wrap up your conversations, and Bruce will ask you to get ready to share in just a minute. In your packet, the reflection questions, the question that we're asking is actually on page 2. So we've got your goals on page 2 in one packet, and the reflection questions on the other. And so the first question is, identify 2 goals where your district has made real good headway this year. So How about this group? Who is your spokesperson?
I can go.
Okay.
We came up with goal 3 was the number one with the district finances because our finance committee has done a great job there. And then goal 2 was our other one as well because there is a lot better relationship between the board and the superintendent. We actually get information versus flying by the seat of our pants. And just, I'm the superintendent. You just do this without, giving us anything. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. How about over here? What 2 goals did you feel like? Here's your group, Linda.
Main 2 we selected were 2 and 3. The 3, 4, of course, we have 2 finance representatives here, and there has been great headway on that, and the relationship between the board and the superintendent.
It's one of the things we're looking for is to see how much you have in common or how much, disparity or differences that you have in what you see. How about you, Bruce? What did you come up with?
I came up goal 3, finances, because we made significant progress there. And I also agree with the relationship between the superintendent and the board in itself. It has made significant progress, but I also thought we made progress on goal 6 with the implementation of the crisis response and violence prevention team.
Thank you, Bruce. Harry, any comments that you want to make?
I'm a softie, so I marked all 3 for you, Bruce. So yeah, so you get a sense. It's interesting how quickly you collated here. And again, you said last summer.
Well, I think the reason I said that is that finance is obviously crucial to the whole operation, and we've made significant progress there, and it indirectly affects students. The relationship between the superintendent and the board and that communication is an important relationship, and it indirectly affects students. But the one that affected students is the crisis response and violence prevention one that we've implemented. That's the only differentiation. And if I had to throw one out for the sake of unanimity, I would drop 6.
Sure. No, that's fine. Still gives us a good sense. So. All right, Lou.
Yeah, we appreciate those insight, Bruce. Okay, let's move to the second question. It's on page 2. And again, back in your small groups, what are a couple goals that's going to be really important for you to keep front and center this coming year? It could be one of the goals that you've already mentioned, or it could be something else that you want to start paying more attention to. So I'm not going to play the obnoxious Jeopardy music this time, but let's give yourselves a couple minutes to go ahead and have that conversation and be ready to share out.
Kind of set the tone for collaboration.
I say 4 and 5. Because I agree with what Bruce said about 6, but we only gave 2 or whatever. So I think we've already done that part. Oh, let's go. Yeah, no, I'm gonna say 4 or 5. Because if you do 4 and 5, that helps with 1. Yeah.
Guys ready? Karen, is your group ready? You guys ready? You guys about ready? Okay. Okay, it looks like everybody's had time to have that conversation. Let's start with your group over here, Linda. What 2 goals did and talk about a little bit why you picked the goals that you said should lean into. Please.
We selected number 5 and 4. Number 5 because of course student achievement is like our priority, and with the early literacy beginning, that's our focus that we need to work on for this year. And the disproportionality, we sort of set it aside a little bit working on the CRVP, and we need to get back to that. Not that it's not important, but we had to place our focus somewhere else.
Yeah, they're all important, right? But it's helpful to kind of think about as a collective group, which are those that you really want to lean into. So thank you. Let's go to Bruce.
I set goal 3, finances, and I'm basing that assessment on the fact that we're in a declining enrollment atmosphere in our district, and in addition to which we have now open and free enrollment out of the district. And if we don't maintain a good handle on our finances and or work to improve and decrease the amount of open enrollment out, we're going to be in a continuing financial downward spiral. The second one I picked was goal 5, student achievement, in particular early literacy, because we know our kids took a hit this last year on their assessments and their reading performance, and that's a focus that if we make significant improvement there may also impact our enrollments.
Thank you, Bruce. How about your team, your group?
We're going to sound like a broken record because it's interesting to me, though, when we did our very first workshop with you guys at the Creative Arts Academy, like we had so many things and now we're all like on the same thing. So we went with goal number 4 and goal number 5. And we had also said, if we're able to make all those things happen, then goal 1 happens as well, because that always has to be at the forefront as well. So
It's kind of like that overarching piece.
right.
The overarching, Harry, you just said the overarching piece, accreditation, the first goal. So it was interesting to hear how you have coalesced around those specific goals with the idea of, as Bruce was talking about, still paying attention. You've made great headway on finances, but keep the focus on that as well. So does this help you in terms of if you're thinking about your upcoming agendas and your plan for the year? Does this kind of discussion help?
Yes, it helps a lot. We're all on the same wavelength, I guess. 7 different people, but we're all kind of, in our own groups given, which, like I said, the very first workshop, we were like all over the board with things, and it's like, so again, a credit to the IASB, so we appreciate that.
Into your work too, and by no accident that your administrative staff is here and hears this conversation as well. It's all about, we've talked multiple times this year about getting in routines and habits and doing what we can to ensure that everybody row or oar in the water to the degree we can, rowing in the same direction. So yeah, thanks to you guys for being here tonight too. So yeah, cool. Slide on the next piece. Okay. And again, the overarch, as Luann and I were planning for tonight, based on some initial guidance from President Gosa and Vice President Hayes and Superintendent Schneckloth. Notice I could say your last name too. Anyway, the idea that part of this may feel like there's kind of like a self-reflection, and that's by design, because you guys have worked focused and continued to sharpen and focus what you're spending your time and energy on most, and that ought to play out. It ought to come out tonight, along with, just like tonight with the goals, what are things that, look how quickly you came together around 4 or 5 and also 3. And I would agree, 1, you do the other stuff well. 1 is the bottom line, what you're going to end up with. But to continue to build on that work. So, in your 2 packets, the one that says Davenport on the front, I'm going to try to remember to call that kind of our main packet. If you turn that to page 3, please. And then if you'd also turn your reflection sheet, the cover on that second packet says reflection sheet, also turn that to page 3. And going to give you a minute to just individually skim page 3. One of the things you talked about last fall was your plan to move forward with committees, and The key from our vantage point, ours being ISB, is it only works as well as the information flows between committees and the whole board. And so this was an early on tool, I think from last September, just almost a year ago. We first worked with you in this school year. And would just ask you, skim the top part for a minute, and then a quick refresher on the questions 1 through 3 at the bottom. So if you would do that, and as you're skimming, want you to be thinking about the reflection questions. What's working well with our committee, board committee, and whole board structure? What are the benefits? You've been using this routine for about a year now. What's working? And the second question, what are the challenges? Any system, any change is going to bring with it things that work well and things that we want to keep our fingers on because challenges or might be things to improve. So do that individually, and then we'll cue you up to talk with your small group about this. So. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you to do this. Would be trying to mix it up a little bit tonight, but would one person from your group swap places with one person from this group just for this conversation? And we'll kind of keep you moving around tonight a little bit. So just need a volunteer to flip places with one of you. Okay, Dan's moving. All right.
Oh, no, we like our group.
Bye.
All right, thanks. Just when you got your paper set up too, Linda.
I did that too earlier. Everybody laughed at me.
Okay, and then we're looking for
I thought you left both of you.
looking for somebody that can be a note taker, please. In a little bit, you might end up with several things, but no. I mean, next step is to ask you to then pick out a couple of your priorities. But start with just build your list and somebody be a note taker. So, what's working well? What are the challenges? Might need to keep paying attention to. So, go ahead, please.
I forgot
there was a thing on the phone. I thought I could just,
That's usually my routine, so thank you, got me off the hook.
sorry.
No, it's 'cause you're-
I thought I could just go under the table. I forgot. What's working?
Bang. Head.
I was like, too late now.
Okay.
It's continually frustrating. What are you doing? Oh, here we go. Updates on committees at almost every meeting, right? Even if it's just saying we haven't done anything new, right? It's still an update, which, you know, we didn't always get in the past. And that just makes sure that everybody knows what's going on. So that's my number one thing.
And my thing that I wrote, that even as a team, that we appear to work better together. More of a cohesive approach, I guess, rather than all over the place like we were.
The committee structure in particular seemed to be a very effective way for our board members to be part of what's happening in the district and relaying information and it's the system. So, you know, someone wants to say, finance committee is why?
For working well, a couple for challenge.
Either by being
When it's time. Okay.
And even with these committees, for as long as I've been with Karen and Kit on these committees, and then with the
The only thing I think
it seems like school finances was all three of those classes. Same year, one time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
But it just kind of made it clear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that was but also
well, it should be the chair. So that's fine. Because like the first couple times I was you usually the chair. So just like Jamie's the chair.
I put the discussion action seems to discussion action paired with the other information. And then these board workshops I think are really helpful.
And the reflections too.
You were kind of doing well.
tell me this. How could this be on my desktop? Right there. Yeah, it shows up nowhere.
Are you trying to drag it somewhere?
Trying to put in a section.
Go to your
Desktop. Oh wait, hold on. The administrators need, you know.
Aaron Vincent. Is that right? I did not. I can tell. Is that right?
One challenge for me is
Okay, save on my computer.
we discuss what we're dealing with.
So now it should be there. Now it. No.
It's
Click on
still
desktop. Go back up and click on desktop.
frustrating that we can't always all understand.
It says it's already there.
I know, right?
So now we have
Crazy.
Now maybe you have to close it. Close it out.
As an example, like,
Desktop. Click on desktop. No, click on desktop up above.
that be? How can I delegate?
At a loss. Should I not save it as a
It's so strange. We are going to be faced with much more.
Okay, great.
What's this understanding?
This is Brenda, who's in charge of this process.
Or understanding the rationale?
So I think what you're saying is the why is
That's another strength way around that. Snippet.
Am I, you're doing
the
this?
whole as a whole.
Oh, got it.
Why are we doing this? So while we discuss an act, I
It's gonna have this like life-size picture.
context, consensus,
I think that's,
context,
I've been
consensus,
asking
why.
about that, so we can try to get that stuff.
Oh, that wasn't too bad.
One of the things that like I would love to see,
If
I
I'm
don't
using
even
these now,
know.
because I'll tell you.
Sometimes we surprise each other. There's a question
I know.
that the purpose for getting Friday reports and getting, like, doing our best to get it on Thursdays, we have a question. But what we do is our public, we want to respond to the public, and so we ask questions first. I'm hearing it, or if I put something on the agenda or send something out, it's surprising.
Well, is it gonna take this long for discussion and stuff? But then sometimes the presentation is like,
Well, if you have a question, clarify, and then say,
Yeah.
yeah, what's this thing?
yeah,
And I don't know if I want to put this.
I guess,
yeah. So when we
think,
usually
and
do
you know a lot of that is where we are. Yeah, that's a good hour. But that's one of the things.
one night, I don't think we'll have a lot of discussion about relationships. But no, I agree with you. They usually all say that. Hey, because a lot of times we'll go through the stuff we need to get in, and then go back through.
You get elected, it's like everyone comes up to you. And they're like, I got a question, I want to know this, I want to know that. So,
Completely different. When we came out with the whole counties, we're in this
No.
one thing, and we can compare. Okay, this is what we did last year. We have side by side.
I told my
Go
parents,
through
I know
and
you
stuff.
have
Ready to share or you want to?
You met Lisa?
all the different things.
Just write a couple keywords.
one of the things for communities, I think it's important for communities to know that they.
Because it's mine is.
Whoever the person is. Right off the bat.
No.
Okay, and this is around helping board members understand
Okay,
the
actually, I just
importance
really
of,
usually hear when
and it's just helping me think about, for the,
Wording, yeah, exactly. Get to inform, better inform.
I think Karen said she's got it now.
Okay, so all I have is we hit the high points.
Whatever.
new people who get a complete distance.
that's what I was wondering. And then some, okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Because
Well,
when you establish a committee,
well, I appreciate that, and also some
Even one of the challenges too.
that's all working out. Thank you.
John,
I don't think they realize.
so I would say that that's one thing that I see.
You're right. Blue.
Write that before you know it.
You can find it.
Yeah.
Blue ones are permanent. You have to watch those are permanent ones.
Well, and that's why I
You're
asked.
writing something else.
Kind of,
But you're welcome to use them.
it's great.
Because sometimes
I'll get my information from, I don't,
Probably the piece
Yeah.
would be a little bit
That's a dangerous word.
pushing on is
And we're
the
building
protocols. We just go to 640.
Okay, so I think what
30-ish minutes.
Yeah, I'll roll it on here. I'll do that one.
The negative.
Committee.
Are we starting at the first one?
That's
Yeah,
about
I'm gonna
20
write down
minutes.
TJ. I think we pick out like
If we need that much. Okay, I think they're ready. Oh.
yes, I'm gonna forward it to you here when I get done reading.
Did you want them to have?
And Bruce, we'll ask you in a half a minute to share your top couple of place areas where you feel that structure is working well, and maybe your top 2 for challenges that come up, things that you want to monitor as a board and continue to pay attention to. So we'll circle back to you, Bruce, in a half a minute.
Luann's gonna copy. I'll write them down for him.
Oh, yeah.
I got reflections and consensus contact one.
I didn't know.
Okay. So I'll do discussion,
Because,
action.
Who are you doing this at? Everybody?
Thanks. She's like, oh, I don't know what you're enough busy. This.
My mom, we know take pictures.
I don't know. I couldn't
And then we need your couple kind of jumping out, put them at the top, put the star line.
Okay, we can do that.
get that done tonight, please.
Can I get home at freaking 10 o'clock? Sure.
So you can almost read it from here.
I know I am coming out.
Whoa. I thought we said 2, Gary.
Overachievers.
What
They told
is
us to
going
each
on
do
here?
it.
Well, maybe they meant
Oh, maybe they meant each group. Did you guys mean each group or each person?
Each group, sorry.
Oh, whoops. Oh, well.
That's usually the direction giver, so don't blame me.
Way to make
You
us
know
look
what?
bad.
We
Good job.
came to them as a consensus, so.
Thank God we can't read them.
We'll help with the pen ones. How's that? How about, where you are, probably all of them, right? If all board member, well, let's add Bruce's as first. Let's catch those.
You want me to ask him?
Yeah.
Hey, Bruce. I'm going to be your scribe, so do you want to go ahead and share the couple that you came up with?
I have a scribe. I was going to send mine in the form of carved tablets.
You can do that too.
Okay. As soon as I find the bush that's burning in my yard. The first one, what is working well with the board committees and the whole board structure? I think the fact that we have ongoing board committees is working well. I think the fact that those committees report back, giving board reports at our regular board meetings is very important. Also, the other thing in the general board structure is the fact that we have developed a appropriate working habit of having items discussed in the committee of the whole meeting that wind up as action items on our agenda, so that board members are no longer surprised or blindsided or feeling like everything's got to be done in a big rush. We were in that cycle for a couple of years where all of a sudden something showed up on the agenda for action, and it was like, well, we got to pass this today because the timeline is such and such or whatever. And we have a much more, I think, proactive approach to our agendas, and I think we've established or developed a year-long calendar where annual items that come up, we know they're coming up. The superintendent, the board president knows that those long-range things, there's a timeline for certain things, and we're prepared for them. I think the challenges we face the general challenges of any board in becoming complacent or becoming lazy, and deciding that, okay, that problem's fixed, we don't have to look at it again, but we need to keep revisiting. I think we also face the problem of turnover. There's a potential for board turnover coming up in this next election in November. And that's something that could be disruptive.
Thank you.
Helps if I'd have been holding the microphone while you were talking. Thanks, Bruce. And I come back to which you as a board and board leadership and TJ asked for tonight. So one of the last things we'll do, one of the last activities we'll do is involve you and your thoughts in onboarding. So if there are new board members this fall, what is it that are the most essential pieces that need to be just become part of how you do business for onboarding? So we'll snap a picture of this and take it with us, but very, very as quickly as I can get at it. The working well, involving board members, the regular updates that was mentioned a couple of times already, the being in a rhythm of discussion one meeting, then action, and that cycle. And really rhythm or habit is the way to say it, and we compliment you and commend you because it's not that way everywhere. And you remember, it wasn't too long ago it was that way for you guys. So such a critical piece, such a critical piece. The items, this is an elaboration on that committee items then funnel their way to the board for whole board work, which can't help myself. You remember Siobhan, our policy and legal counsel, saying during the last year, the committee exists to serve the board. And it's not the other way around. It's such an important piece to help your broader community and staff understand that the committee serves the whole board, and it only is going to work as well as that communication flows both directions. Year-long calendar, reflections, ISB board workshops. Luann and I can live off that for a couple months. So, challenges, getting board requests on agendas sooner if the meeting is shorter, so kind of pacing that. Reminding yourselves, committee serves the whole board. Potential for board turnover. The complacency Bruce mentioned, which can, sometimes it's complacency and sometimes it's just a lot of new things come on, right? Or on your plate. And then it's easy to have some stuff just kind of lop off. Organizational amnesia is what I call it, and it happens. A challenge, reaching consensus and keeping in mind the context and the why. Any of these areas that any of you want to comment on before we move to the next piece? Yeah, please, Dan.
We did talk about like getting things on the agenda, and then I kind of, because not everyone's on the agenda committee, right? It's just the president, vice president, superintendent, and Bruce knows how this goes as well. When you're trying to plan for a meeting, you never know how long something's going to take. You try to plan for a good amount of time, but sometimes the things that you thought you weren't going to have a lot of discussion on, you wind up having a lot of discussion on. And then the things that you think that you're going to have a lot of discussion on, you not so much. And I don't know if that's just because of the way that we've been doing our meetings now, where we discuss and then we vote on it. So it kind of makes it easier for us to filter more stuff into our regular meetings and things like that. And the other part of it too, when you make a board request, and we've talked about this at the agenda committee meetings, it depends on how long it's going to take a staff person to get that stuff. And then what are they going to take away from to be able to do that? Because obviously we want to work towards our goals, because that's what, we've set the superintendent and charged them with. So it's a lot of things in mind, but I do want to compliment Miss T back here, because she does an awesome job. When we have our agenda committee meetings, they're like side by side. Here's our annual calendar. Here's what we got. Here's what we did last year. Boom, 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 and we can go through and do it. And it helps the process a lot. And then we pull up the board request sheets as well, and then we're able to look at that stuff also. So, again, I want to give huge kudos to Brenda. When you have a team that's working together, as well as the whole board, everyone's firing on all 7 cylinders. We're getting some stuff done. So,
This is one of those little hints you mentioned, Linda, and not suggesting you do this, but some boards have found it helpful to do something like this. They might cycle another board member through one month, another board member another month. Now that's ECADS, now it's another calendar. And I get you all have lives outside of board work. Doesn't probably always feel like that, but they'll cycle in. Or you're supposed to have a life outside of board work. Anyway, they will cycle in a board member on an agenda planning piece, and then a month or two later, another board member, just to help provide some exposure or familiarity to how that process works. It helps, and again, another communication piece, can help demystify things, can also serve as a capacity building process, so that who knows who's going to be board president in 2 years. And so if another board member, other board members have had an occasional experience with that, to get a sense how it flows, how it goes. Don't need to do that, but it's certainly something where I not too long ago, a board team said we try at least each year to ensure that the other board members that are not in the formal leadership position have a chance to cycle in. And you might, here's my opinion, you might start with members who've not been a board president before, because this would be a new exposure for them. So a positive exposure, unlike the kinds of exposure we've been dealing with the last year and a half. Any other comments or reactions, or Lou, additional thoughts? Okay.
Noted.
All right, noted. All righty, thanks. There's no pressure on that one, like we're watching for it now. We aren't. There's other things we're watching for, but that's not one of them. How's that? Okay. Then going to ask you to please do this, and then Lou's going to set you up and move forward. Just a comment, because probably responsibility in any communication breakdowns, you need to be looking at me. So page 4 in both the reflection questions and page 4 of your main packet. And then we're going to also ask you, I believe it was on the right-hand side in the back of your red folder, was a single page with these continuums, which we worked out with this spring. So if you really have all 3 of those out in front of you, the continuums, the protocols, and the reflection questions. Lou, did I forget anything on those parts before we move forward?
I think you've got it. And Bruce, hopefully you found those as well in your packet. So if you take a look at page 4 in your main packet and you look at the Davenport Information Flow Operating Protocols, at the top of the page, it refers back to, well, it seems like 6 months ago, but it was just May when we worked together to help you develop these information protocols to really maximize the communication flow between the board, superintendent, amongst yourselves. And we find that this kind of work really helps position the board superintendent team for that effective governance. So good for you guys to spend the time on that. This is the first time, though, after that meeting, we did some massaging of that information and bringing it back to you. So on page 4 of the packet are those information protocols. Again, the first time that you're seeing them. And we're going to give you some time individually to just to reflect on those and read them. Think about those in conjunction with your information continuums. Have those side by side, because the protocols do refer to these continuums. And on page 4, then, the reflection question, have these 2 questions in mind as you're reflecting. And the first one is, what are the advantages of our board following these protocols? And then what are the challenges when our board doesn't follow these protocols? So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to read those, think about them, and then we'll just do some large group sharing out on these questions.
Well, maybe we missed it or something. Maybe we did. Well, we might have. I'm sorry, I really did. I'm sorry. I can walk into that one. Yeah, no, dude. No.
Yeah, I'll just push the button.
Oh, no.
About ready to share? Okay. Bruce, are you about ready to share? Or do you need some more time? Let's go ahead and open it up for large group discussion on what are your thoughts around the first question? What are the advantages of having a set of protocols like this and when the board implements them? And we're just going to ask you to speak to that. And Bruce, do you want to start first? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think when you follow the protocols, you establish a smoother running operation, and you have a more effective vehicle to share information that people are requesting. When you short circuit them, you cob up the works.
Anybody think of something similar to what Bruce said and want to elaborate on that? Allison?
Sort of very similarly, I said when we do follow these protocols, we all should be pretty much on the same page. And we minimize rumor or inaccurate information because we're channeling through the superintendent. And in our case, it's either, our Friday updates or through our board questions and the procedures we've talked about.
So that consistency can really help.
Yeah, people aren't getting different answers from different people.
Thank you. What else? Kent?
Some of the same things. The meetings run smoother, more timely information to the board. I think the superintendent updates and the board secretary updates are very good, and it just gives us an idea of what's going on. And one thing that Karen and I have talked about, being the newest members on the board, is the onboarding of new board members. Karen and I went to the IASB conference. That was like 2 weeks after we were elected, and that was very helpful. But otherwise, we were just kind of thrown into the mix, and it was, for me anyway, it was kind of a struggle, meeting procedures and just going through the whole process. So I think any new board member that comes on, that should be very helpful to have onboarding.
I think that was one of the things that was recognized and that you've talked about it. And that's one reason why we're going to have some brainstorming at the end of the meeting tonight, is just for that reason. And that's pretty common as people get busy, not saying it's the best way to approach it, but that's pretty common that business gets started and then the onboarding doesn't maybe happen as deeply as it maybe you wish it would have. Thank you. What else? What else is, what are some other advantages?
It's pretty much the same, but I just said that we're more effective and there's not a lot of arbitrary thoughts going out, that everything is more so synchronized. And we're linked more to the agenda and the Friday updates. Some of the board requests that we have even been able to been put in the Friday updates rather than a separate meeting for them.
Considering where you came from a year and a half ago, I was thinking back to some of those early meetings. You've really come a long way in terms of your information flow. TJ, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think it adds consistency, predictability, and a process. And if there's an absence of those, you have confusion, inconsistency, and unpredictability. And we all know how all human beings behave in that. So while we're not perfect, we have something to refer back to. It's great because we don't dig this out when we're doing the agenda planning committee, but I'm kind of proud to say that we do our best to try and follow it. So it was great to look at this because I do remember this, putting this together, and we did our best to conceptualize and practice it.
And part of why we led that activity in May, again, aligned with what you said. You were already talking in the spring about how do we ensure that potential new members understand, and how do we make sure the best of what we've been practicing using sticks. And that was part of the reason for getting these captured, to be able to use those for those kind of purposes. Yes, and for the administrative team to understand the board's commitment and how they're looking to do business with each other, with you as superintendent, and they're touched by these things as well. So, sure. Anything else, Lou, around the advantages, or we want to move to the other?
I think one of the things, and it was prior to me being on here, just what I have heard, that sometimes the structure was set up that one board member, usually the president, knew a whole lot of stuff and nobody else on the board knew it. And I don't feel that way now. If TJ's not telling us, Dan is telling us, we are all on the same page and not one person having all the information.
Which is good. A catchphrase we use is, to the best degree every board can, information for one should be information for all. And yes, there may be some things Dan hears about first because he's helping, or Dan and Linda with TJ to frame up an agenda, but that shouldn't be held in a basket or veiled where the rest of you can't make the best decisions possible if you don't have access to the info. So that's cool to hear. Yeah.
Thank you. Dan, did you get a chance to share?
Sure, I can do that for you. You always call on me on everything, Luann. I think the advantages to the protocols, right? You have the board is up here, then the superintendent, and then the cabinet, right? And then everyone else. So we have to lead by example on this, and if we're following our protocols and procedures, and Harry, you had kind of hit on this already, it helps the administrative team and staff, they kind of know where the board's at. I'm sure if you ask some of them that have been around for a while, our meetings are a lot better, more productive than they ever were and stuff like that. But it's because, we were able as a board to sit down and do these things. So,
Great. How about challenges?
I
Go ahead, Bruce.
would add one more thing. I think, too, when you follow these procedures effectively over a period of time, you redevelop trust in one another, in the administrative team and in the board and your colleagues and the whole thing. Because it wasn't all that long ago, there was a lack of that.
Allison?
Yeah, that's exactly one of the things that I was thinking of. And along those lines, I said if we do follow these protocols, we also are going to be respectful of the staff and other board members' time and effort, because we won't be asking people to do stuff that they shouldn't or they don't have time to do, or at least we'll have thought about it. I can't guarantee we're going to be perfect about that. But
Well, in that piece, you've heard Gary Sinclair, your financial advisor. I don't know if he's used this phrase with you, but a cornerstone for him is we can do anything we want as an organization, but we can't do everything.
Right.
And so it does become that if the information's out in front of you and all 7 of you, along with TJ, have the opportunity to weigh in and make those decisions, then you can prioritize and take care of the things that are most in need, and the other stuff has to wait. And boy, that's hard. That is really hard, but it's so critical.
How about a couple challenges? Or what did you come up with when you thought about if a board doesn't follow?
I'll go ahead and start us off.
Thank you.
A lot of them are kind of the opposite of everything we just said. Another one was that we have the potential, or we do come across as unprofessional and dysfunctional as a district if we're not following these protocols. We look sort of all over the place.
Thank you. What else? Anything else?
All right. I'll just pick a random topic. So I guess one of the challenges would be if we didn't follow the protocol. So say there was information that we wanted, right? And then to give a little background on this, before when we would ask previous superintendents, and I said previous, I didn't name anybody. Just wanted to get that disclaimer out there. We would not get that information. And so then it felt like you had to, or former presidents prior to Bruce, and I didn't name anybody, they would hold on to that, and then you had no way to go around them because they were the president or the superintendent. Well, then it kind of made you as a board member want to go directly to a staff member because that trust was gone. So which I think we're working back at that and things, but then the challenge is when you go directly to an administrative person versus a superintendent, then the superintendent's not included and doesn't know, and then it puts that I want to call him a staff person, but it puts that administrator in a bad spot because your ultimate boss is asking you something, but your boss doesn't know about it. And then it might make a distrust there. They're like, well, why would they come to me if the superintendent's not willing? So, and I don't know if I said that eloquently enough, but I mean, that's kind of a real issue we have really had here. It's happened a lot more so than it should have. I know it's getting a lot better. Like we said, we get the superintendent reports and we're able to get the information we need and things like that. So that's, one of those challenges that, we're kind of working on and stuff.
But to all of your credit, you've devoted time at the table to talk about the information need and the issues when somebody doesn't follow and there's role confusion. I mean, just even having those conversations. And when you talked about the opportunity for onboarding, those are the conversations you've been having all the summer. And so we've seen some great progress in that, where it appears that you've said that information is flowing and people understand their role and how best to approach that. Anybody else? Linda?
I pretty much said the same thing, but I just kind of sum mine up. It's just kind of reinventing the wheel. You go to the potentially wrong person to get information that someone else could have without putting those additional man hours in it, when we could simply just go to the superintendent and he could send that out to who has that information readily accessible, rather than have someone else working with something and wasting time when they're not needing to.
And you don't really know, as we've talked about before, what TJ has already given that person in terms of their workload. TJ, do you want to comment anything about how helpful it is?
I second, if I were at a chart, I'd put another red dot by that one, Harry. But I kind of said this is why we follow a process, and this is what happens when we don't follow a process. And I would say that the biggest thing that I've noticed over the last 5 years is when we catch each other off guard both ways.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we don't follow a process because I've asked for this, I didn't get it, I caught, so this ensures that the dialogue will always happen, because you can always test the temperature of the workload on an school administration in a district, and you can also test the temperature of a school board member who really wants to hear or see something right away. And so that's what I think is really important for us as we move forward.
Yeah, I think about it. I'm going to go back 20 plus years ago when I was a principal, and I think about sometimes the awkward spot I'd find myself if a board member came to me and was wanting me to do X or Y, or just interacting with me about it. And the soup we'd not talked about that, or maybe 2 weeks before, the soup or my supervisor and assistant soup had just outlined goals for me for the next quarter, the next semester, the next year. And now the board member is genuinely advocating and seeking and wanting me to do X or Y. I'm not in a real good spot there, am I? It puts me in an awkward spot. And it doesn't matter whether, as a principal, I've initiated contact with the board member, or they've initiated with me, or kind of serendipitously it happened. Doesn't make any difference. But that puts me in an awkward spot now, because the soup and I just outlined these things I'm supposed to work on, or based on last month's board meeting, these are 2 things that are high priority. And now I'm talking with an individual board member, and it's seeming like there's something else. So that whole communication, mistrust, surprises, all that stuff starts to play out. That's for sure. Any other challenges if, as a whole board, you're not?
Harry?
Yeah, please.
Well, I don't want to throw cold water on this, and so I'm conflicted a little bit.
Yeah.
I spent some time going around visiting the various school buildings, visiting with principals and teachers, and I did not feel like that was going around the superintendent, because I want to get a feel. And the superintendent, that's one person's opinion, and I want to get feedback from more than just one person. And my visits, I thoroughly enjoyed my visits. I got a lot out of them. You got a feel for the buildings and that. So I know there's a fine line between micromanaging and overseeing what's going on. And I've said this before, for what's gone on in the past, if I'm going to err somewhere, I'm going to err on the side of micromanaging.
And I appreciate your approach. I don't view it as throwing water. I mean, that's an important perspective or view that brings. I think where I find myself as I've worked with boards over the last 20 years and board soup teams is probably the best pathway is just periodically talk about how that piece is going and how that's working, because certainly you were elected by the community, and they look for you to be listeners. I'm back to Gary Sinclair's comment, we can do anything we want, we just can't do everything. So it's for all of us, just being really mindful that Lou and I were talking about this, not related to your district, but just general conversation on the drive over today about the piece you can't control as board members is the perception. When I interact with somebody, whether they initiate it or I do, I can't control the perception when we walk away, what they're expecting that I'm going to do with that. Am I going to have just listened? Think about it as a continuum. On one hand, I maybe just listen. Maybe another step is I'm going to pass that on to an appropriate channel. Maybe another step is their perception is they're expecting me to do something about it. And that might include something real active like bringing it to a board meeting, taking it to board leadership, saying, President, Vice President, we need to tackle X or Y. might be all the way up to bringing it to a board meeting or proposing a motion. And we can't, as board members, control their perception, but there's that whole array of expectations and trying to sort that out. And what does that mean? So again, that's a hard one. If I was going to pick one or two areas for board work, I would say it's number 8 in your protocols. That's regardless who initiates. That's a hard one. That may be the or one of a couple of the most challenging circumstances. Your thoughts about that? It's hard. It's hard. You said, Kent, there's a fine line, and bingo. That's exact. There is a fine line. That's a hard one. Yeah, Bill.
Does it work? Mind if I make a couple comments?
Go ahead.
You want to get something into?
If there is some disagreement you prefer not, I won't.
Okay.
I think the balance that has to be struck in the topic that Kent just brought up is the change of the district from a philosophy that was about site-based management to now a concerted district-wide strategy that has to be implemented for improvement to actually take place. The data and the student achievement that you see on a regular basis is the product of that site-based management. And so when you talk to building level leaders in this district right now, they may not like some of the things that they're seeing in moving to district-wide strategy to try to change student achievement data. And so being able to have that filter of saying, yeah, I absolutely want to be responsive and understand the positions of students and of teachers and of building level administrators. But I've also got to put that into the context of that larger picture as well and find the balance between the two. Because there are a lot of folks that enjoy site-based management. I get to run my building the way I want to run my building, and if they would just give me the things I need, then I could be a rock star. But then there's 25, 26 different strategies going on in the district. And again, where we're at is a product of 25 or 26 different strategies going on in the district. And so finding that balance of here's the input of the people, but here is the district-wide approach towards change. And when the plan is talked about here in a little bit about what is going to be done to improve that's taking people's perceptions and taking their thoughts into account when that district-wide plan is, but then it's holding everyone accountable for that district-wide plan instead of a site-based scenario.
Well, Harry, I for the most part, I totally disagree. I want to hear from the people that have the most contact with the students, and that's the principals and the teachers. I want to know from the teachers and principals. Okay, they're with those students every day. Okay, those of us sitting in this room, we're not with those students every day. Okay, so that's what what my focus would be is, let the teachers teach.
Yeah, probably my final thought here for now would be that probably is a conversation, Kent and whole board, TJ, that's worth, especially this fall, and see what happens in terms of election, et cetera. But that would be one probably worth revisiting again, because there are fine lines, and it's not as black and white or as crystal clear as do these two things, don't do these two things, but it's talking through and considering what's the impact, and what's a balance or something we can live with. So Okay. I'm going to ask this of you, please.
Can I just say
Yeah,
one other
please
thing?
do.
And looking this over, I understand our board request should be something that can be done relatively short amount of time. But then I disagree with that in that there have been some board requests I have made on student achievement and finances. It's going to take somebody in this building or in the central office, they're going to have to put some time into it, but it is important. I'm not just asking fluff information that's going to make somebody, so, you know, be respectful of their time. I understand that. But on the other hand, if I'm trying to save things financially or some things I should, as a board member, we all should know about student achievement, it's going to take some time on their part to put together a presentation, find the information. So I guess I understand their need to time not be all on mine, but there are times it's going to be a bigger haul than normal,
Harry?
and I think it's important.
Yes, yes.
I think about, we've had some conversations about some of our most recent board requests, and you know, the fact that you have to ask for math data, it means that we don't have a routine and cadence about how we present data. And so when is the best time to review that data? So when we talked about a goal for us as we move forward, is that reviewing math data, reviewing our data should be in a rhythm, and a cadence where board members shouldn't have to ask for that. And right now, that's what we're trying to build. That's what we're trying to bring forward. What does that data wall look like up on the wall? What, you know, how that feeling you get where you know the last regular board meeting there's going to be a financial report. We're going to see how we're doing. That same feeling should happen around student achievement and student data and things of that nature. And then that way our board requests will not be so overwhelming. We've got a lot of, while we've got really good procedures in place, a foundation, thank you, Linda, we've got a lot of work to do. You know, so when you presented data, you also have to have a plan beside it that has an administrator lens on it, that's been vetted through the teacher calibration team, that has been, so that you can see some of those ways that we do have to listen to our teachers more. We have to, and I think that those are huge goals as we move forward. That way board members don't have to ask for those kinds of things. And I will also say that we've also found a procedure and a repeatable place for presentations. I think one of the things that's really been positive is the presentations. So we've really tried to put those in that spot, but I can think of a handful of those board requests that I'm like, oh, that should be here in terms of the calendar of the year. So I agree with you. There are things that when board members ask for them, we should do it, and we should move forward with it. And then the goal would be that we're presenting information in a timely manner to where we don't have to request it. Like when some of those requests come in, I'm like, man, that should be on our board agenda. So those are my initial thoughts when I heard that. And I can appreciate what you're saying. We do need to. There's certain things you're elected, you have to report. The other thing that I know about our board members is that they're coming from a place of ultimately caring and taking responsibility for the community. And so when those things come in, that's one of the things that I notice about our school board members, and you're very connected to the community. So I have a good pulse, every single one of you, a good pulse on what the community wants to hear. So finding that balance of that pre-planned and then what's coming at us is important. So I acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think too, just looking at these continuums, there's a risk. Lou and I had talked about this when we created these, going, boy, how do we talk about these without it feeling like, you know, the right side's good or bad and the left side's good or bad? That wasn't our intent, but they can certainly take that on, and we fully agree with you, Karen. There would be times, so what, it's going to take 30 hours or 40 hours. If it's a really critical piece, the board should have it to make the best decisions possible. I think when we developed these, it was just things to keep in mind. Let's be mindful of how much time or how close or far away it might be from district priorities, and with darn good reasons. It's information the board needs anyway. So that makes absolute sense. So thanks for bringing that up. Probably what's going to feel like in a hurry here. A couple quick things. And Dan, Linda, or TJ jump in, but our understanding was that one of those areas that was mentioned by the auditors was just to do the importance of doing a quick revisit on abstain versus recusal. So if we can do this in a couple minutes, I'm going to nominate you for an award, Lou. We'll see if we can get that. But if you look to the middle part, trying to help just differentiate that, the abstention from recusal. I'd say this and invite Lou to jump into it. But the abstaining, if board member Harry's going to abstain, the intent is the purists would look and say, I'm participating in the discussion right up to the point where we vote, and then I'm declaring that I'm going to abstain. And it's really helpful, tremendously helpful, to explain why I'm abstaining. And the other thing that the attorney types, I'm glad I'm not an attorney type, but those who are, would say is any school district, any district in the state of Iowa or other bodies just needs to monitor, regulate how frequently we're using abstain. And then there's some comments, considerations down below about sometimes when it gets overused, it's because it's that second one, there's a proverbial fire, second bullet in the bottom, in the bottom section. I'm abstaining because I don't want to declare my vote on something that's a hot button item, hot potato. And then the second thing I would comment on is recusal. Would be when there is a conflict of interest or the perception of this is going to be perceived as I've got a real strong conflict of interest or potential. That if I'm recusing myself, again, like abstaining, that I'm declaring why. And that the difference between abstaining and recusal is that I'm not going to be participating, that's the spirit of it, in the discussion and the deliberations up until then. So if I say I'm going to need to recuse this one myself from this one because X and Y, then I'm just sitting back, I sit in the meeting and listen, but it's the not intentionally or unintentionally influencing this decision by my deliberations or being a player in there, influencing it. And I'm also not voting. Lou, what else would you add from your perception on this? And we visited with Siobhan about this and a couple other colleagues. So.
I think this is just a good discussion for all boards to have. I think it's a little bit of a mystery, the differences between the two ideas, and that is just a good, healthy discussion for any board team to have.
I've got a question because I've thought this through. I am a retired Davenport teacher. I purchase school district insurance. When an insurance question comes to the board, and where should I be standing on this? I've also served on 2 insurance committees when I was teaching. I have a lot of background knowledge on it, and yet I am benefiting. Well, not really. I pay for it, but so does that fit here, or do I get to fully participate when that comes up?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I don't have an absolute for you, and Lou doesn't either. That may be one though, because you find yourself there. That may be one where that's worth you run that past the district attorney and say, what guidance would you give us, or we'll help Siobhan get connected with you from our office on one like that. That's there's not an automatic there. Yeah.
I just
Especially since the perception might be that you're going to benefit from discussion and
Yes.
yep.
I'm
So
trying to sway in one way because I would benefit. I don't want that ever to happen, but
we were talking about instances. So thank you for generating a good one for us to think about as an example.
And your legal counsel may be able to say to you, that would be a reasonable one. You're going to abstain. You may share insights along the way, but I'd recommend that you abstain when it comes time for the vote. Or they might say, we'd recommend as your attorney, their legal counsel, that'd be one you'd recuse yourself. But again, you have some real powerful insights, and just because you were a former staff member doesn't automatically prevent you. But again, it's perceptions as well as reality.
Allison?
I think that's an excellent example of why ethics is sometimes a gray area, because you can do the right thing in whichever direction you go. I guess the one thing I would say is that in most of these types of situations, an abstention is going to be just sort of a last a couple minutes. It's at one meeting. And then a recusal is going to be over multiple sessions, because if you're recusing yourself, you can't participate in any of the discussions. And so for most issues, that means you won't be involved in any of it.
And while you might be sitting at the meeting listening, you're not going to engage in
Correct.
the deliberations and the discussion. At least as we've consulted a couple colleagues, this one pager is the best we can come up with to try to take a run at differentiating.
And to talk about why.
Yes, talk about why and recognize, like the mini case study you have, that's where they really get clarified. Yeah. If we can have about 7 minutes, quick input on Padlet for onboarding, and we'll move on.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
You guys give me the look. We'll move this quickly. Thanks, Lou.
Thank you. So Brenda sent out the link to the Padlet, and if that's too hard for you to access and you just want to handwrite and give us ideas for, the question was posed to us, can you help us think about, and then you brought it up earlier, Karen, if you do, what would you like to have as onboarding this year for your team? If you were to have new people join this year, you may or may not. But if you did, there's a couple questions that we posed. What information would have been helpful for you to learn as a new board member? You've already kind of generated some of those. What would I wish I would have known? And what do you believe the district should invest time in helping new board members learn about? So I don't know if we can see the Padlet on the big screen or not, but does everybody have access to that website? And if not, like I said, we'll just give you some paper and we'll take it back and add it to your thoughts. Bruce, I don't know, do you have access to the Padlet page?
Not yet.
It was in an email. There was a link to the Padlet page from Brenda. On the page, there are the two questions that I've posed in blue. The yellow question is a example. It says, Harry needs a new haircut. And it said, practice adding comments and hearting this comment. So if somebody adds a comment or an idea for onboarding and you like it, you can heart it. You can vote for it. This is great. You can add a comment if you would like in the little comment section. Click anywhere, double click to add a Post-it note, or use the plus sign in the bottom right-hand corner.
So do you want us to add comments to your questions, or do you want us to make our own Post-its?
Thank you for clarifying. So I'd like you to add your own Post-it notes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Some of these, I think Brenda added a couple just to test a couple days ago. So all the ones in white would be those that you are doing, unless you've color-coded them yourself.
Oh, hey, look at that. Double click.
What would be helpful for you to make sure that new board members learn about? And some of you are explaining your thinking, and that's really helpful. Thank you. Giving an example of what you're talking about. And if you see one that you really like, go ahead and heart it. Some of you are already doing that. If you agree with it.
No hearts on the Harry needs a haircut, okay? Please.
Oh my God.
Use of exclamation points works too.
That's so weird watching stuff show up.
And this just captures that for you?
You can export it. Color, you can.
It feeds all of them. And initially it was in the west region, but it was changed to north. Because, I don't know. We try to keep things on your toes a little bit. We tell you a lot, and then we just don't tell you a few things every now and then. It's funny because I had a principal. I knew I was going to children's school.
You want to color code it? You can. If you want to get fancy and color code it, you can click on the right hand side under the three little buttons.
Any of you that have used the Post-it notes will add yours to this. And one final thought, we'll pull us to a close. So thank you for your time. Dan and Linda, one of our takes would be, not tonight, but that we just ask you to reflect again back on those protocols and ask yourself, what would it take for us to ensure that these are in operation, that we're using these? What will it take for us to commit to do that? And as some of you said earlier, is that you found yourself looking down the list of those protocols saying many of these things or most of these things we're already doing. So we're challenging you to think through about what kind of commitment would it take for that to be the way you continue to do business. And not for tonight, but moving forward. So thank you. Lou, anything else, or we'll
Nope.
back out here?
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your continued commitment to learning.
Thank you both very much, as well as your whole team. I always feel like every time we meet with you, I walk away with homework, Harry. I thought when I met with you and did all these extra workshops that would get rid of the homework, but it just keeps on coming. Again, thank you both.
I hope we're putting you up in a nice place.
No, in fact, we're gonna listen in live on about half the literacy report, and we're gonna hit the road because we started a long ways from here about 5:30 this morning. So the old guy's getting a little tired.
Motel
You're a
6
workaholic.
light on for you.
And thanks for all your comments, the easy and the hard ones. It's the hard ones that we grow and learn more from. So thank you. Much. I'm smiling when I say that. Thank you.
Can't tell you how much it means
it's-
to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us. And the exercises that we go through tonight strengthen the work that we've already done. So thank you very much.
Did any board members have anything else for Harry and Luann?
I would just say it's good to see those guys. We haven't seen them since way before the pandemic when we were meeting in the conference room at the bus depot, which used to be the CIA.
Everybody Everybody just gets to be reminded how short I am, Bruce. Thank you.
And we provided you dinner.
All right, with being done with this topic and we've been on it for a little bit now, I'm going to call for a 5-minute bathroom break real quick for everybody, and then we'll get right back to it.
See, that's what I did.
Real quick before we go to the next topic, board members, if you could, at the end of the meeting, fill out your Isb Workshop Feedback, and then we'll have Brenda collect them, and then she can scan them to Harry and Luann. And Bruce, if you got them, if you just fill it out and email it to Brenda, and she can send them all in, that'd be perfect.
Will do.
Thank you, sir. All right. Now we'll move on to item 1.03, their early literacy plan. I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. With us today, we have Dr. Stevenson and Tara Parrish from our Learning and Results Division in Davenport Community Schools. Today, you're going to hear about our plan for early literacy in the upcoming school years. One of the things that I want to draw attention to is the continuous improvement process that has been utilized in creating this. We did consensus work. We looked at data, all as a unified team in Davenport Community Schools. I'm very, with the quickness that this has happened and occurred over the month of July, I'm very pleased with the work that has been put together. This team of people has spoken with administrators and teachers from all across the district, worked collaboratively with the AEA. So what you are hearing today is our proposal for early literacy moving forward. I also want to make a quick distinguishment. This is a huge part of the Davenport plan as we move forward. A lot of what you're going to hear later tonight about the ESSER dollars are going to be focused around early literacy and PBIS. And so tonight you're going to hear about early literacy. On the 9th, we're going to hear about PBIS. And so the overarching theme for the two components that you're going to hear are this multi-tiered system of support, a system to support students that are doing well and not doing well. And so that's the overall theme for tonight. So with that being said, Dr. Stevenson, when you take it away. Thank you for being here tonight, by the way. And Tara, thank you so much for giving your time. Tara is a specialist, and she is kind of our guru in literacy, and she's outstanding for our district. She's such a wonderful resource for us to have. So Tara, thank you so much for being a part of this team to help create this. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Stevenson, and thank you, TJ, for that welcome and for setting the stage for what is the first of two presentations that you'll hear around the multi-tiered system of supports for this school year. We'll have two priority areas that we are focusing on, early literacy as well as PBIS, and Tara is a resident expert that I'm really grateful for to have here on my right side, and she and I are going to tag team and present this to you tonight. And so if you remember at a board meeting earlier in July, we had Shane Williams here from Mississippi Bend AEA, and he shared our spring early literacy data. And I think the big takeaways that the board had, as well as everyone in attendance, is that we had two primary concerns, which included our students were underperforming in the areas of literacy, and then we had subgroups who also had significant gaps as compared to other subgroups. And so our goal is to take action on that plan. You'll see the frameworks that we used as part of our collaborative process this last month or two. And hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions at the end. And I also wanted to hopefully highlight for you that we really dug into those IASB questions that you have in front of you, because we want to make sure that our presentation gives you the information you have to answer the questions that come up. For example, where are we in terms of our early literacy goal? And you heard that at the last meeting. And what does the Davenport literacy data tell us over time, which is that there's a historical trend of underperformance in the area of literacy. And with that being said, we'll go to the next slide. We have the definition here as shared to us by the Department of Education about what is a multi-tiered system of supports. I know I was listening to our directors here talk about onboarding and so many things you have to learn. And if you don't have a background in education, I'm sure the acronyms we throw at you can be a little bit challenging. So to answer the question, what exactly is MTSS, I'll stop talking here for a moment and let you all reread it if you've read it this weekend, or read it for the first time to yourself. Is there a board member who wouldn't mind reading it out loud for everyone else?
A multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, is a decision-making framework of evidence-based practices in instruction and assessment and addressing the needs of all students by examining data from within the educational system, as well as identifying students who need additional support. Supports are provided in both small groups and individual settings and are monitored to ensure they support all the learners, demonstrate proficiency in the Iowa core standards, and leave school ready for life.
Thank you, Director Hayes. So I do want you to know too that MTSS is not something that our local team created. This is a framework that's used across the state as well as across the nation, with the belief that if a system identifies issues within student learning, we as a system can make a plan to ensure high results for everyone and not leave that up to chance. That's not what our goal is here. We want to make sure we have a tight system, clearly defined for all the users, so that early literacy is not just a goal, but it's a reality. And we're going to do that by continuing to focus on sharing data, which I've heard from board members. And the 3 meetings I've been at is really important for all of you. So being transparent with our literacy data, prioritizing how we support students, which will in turn address some of our disproportionality, and then really being laser-like focused with our staff in terms of how they spend their time in professional learning. We've all heard at board meetings and around the community, I'm sure Director Poston heard this too when he visited the schools, that staff are juggling a lot of plates and they're feeling burnt out, and they want to feel successful. And so our goal is to make sure that the professional learning we give them enables them to do just that. So tonight, our goal is to give you information about what did the data tell us, what are we going to do in what time frame, and how are we going to address underperformance and gaps in performance, so that when this plan is implemented, we will be able to achieve our goals and answer any community concerns around early literacy or disproportionality. Thanks, Tara. And on slide 4, you will see a list there as we dive into our plan about, let's get into it. Who was doing this? What were they doing? Where were they doing it? When were they doing it? Why, et cetera. And so we wanted to share with you this early literacy team composition, and you'll see this again next week with the PBIS team. So there's a balanced representation of Mississippi Bend AEA staff, consultants, administrators, as well as Davenport also. And then when that team got together and was working, we recognized that we inherently represented many of the populations and subgroups that we are so concerned about and want to address in order to close any disproportionality that we're seeing. And so we really caused ourselves to think, pause, and ensure that we're thinking about our early childhood learners. We're thinking of our students who live in poverty, our students who are learning English, and in particular our Black and Brown students who have historically underperformed, as our data showed us last month. And after we got done considering all those things and looking into that, which Tara will get to in a second, we recognize that the feedback loop has to expand. There's been concerns about communication and people knowing information at certain times, and we wanted to be able to benefit from the regional structure that's been developed and this change in our organizational leadership structure. And so we dug in and tasked ourselves with, in a very short time period, creating a feedback loop that included this team that had been meeting at the AEA, sharing information at the cabinet level, which TJ is a part of course, which then was feedback that trickled down. We went to the instructional cabinet, which is the ILDs, Kim Hoffman, myself, and TJ. We had a meeting with elementary principals today, and they will be the primary users of this information. Our all administrator group will be hearing this on Wednesday at SAI. We also had a meeting with our TLCS oversight committee because some of the action steps you'll hear about impact our agreement in terms of TLC. We had a teacher calibration team that that Karen was a part of, right, last week. And then, of course, tonight, the school board, we wanted to get feedback from you also so that we can continue to keep incorporating things that we learn and hear from others.
Okay, can you hang on 1 second?
Sure.
Director Poston has a question.
Yeah. My only concern is on your implementation team, why weren't there any teachers or current principals involved in that team?
The team that met in July at the AEA, sure. We didn't have anyone noted on that team at that time because we needed to get an initial plan developed in a short amount of time to meet some deadlines, as you know, that we were facing. But our plan is to incorporate teachers and principals at a deeper level. We have a standing meeting that'll be coming here once school starts for this team, and there's definitely opportunities to include more people.
Well, I would think that it'd be important that teachers were involved right from the get-go, right from the very start. So, again, it's the teachers that are going to implement this plan after a while. And so I think it's important that they're included in that.
Director Beck has real quick, hold on. Is it going to be easier for you to do this and then have us like jot down questions to ask, or would you like them to stop you? Kind of what are you used to, I guess?
My preference in the past has been that people note their questions and then we have a discussion after the presentation because there's a chance what you might be asking will come later in the presentation. But again, it's the board's decision, so I can work with either.
I actually just needed a clarification on a definition of something.
Sure.
So that would be super helpful. But I'll write down all the rest of my questions. Can you explain for me and anybody who might be listening what a teacher calibration group is?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, do you want to do that one, Tara?
Like, who's on that group? What do they do? Yeah, you'll have to bring it pretty close to you to make it.
Thank you. All right. The teacher calibration team were groups of teachers at each grade level, and we have worked with them throughout the return to learn as well. Many of them were the same. Some were new, given the change in the focus from return to learn to early literacy and PBIS. So we made sure to have representation from each grade level. More than one at K3, and because of the heavy focus on early literacy, we also had coaches, interventionists who aren't classroom teachers but still working with students and certainly impacted by this plan, and innovators as well.
So these are the people at the teacher level, instructor level.
Yes, classroom
that would
teachers
then share it with
primarily.
everybody in their building.
So it was largely to share the plan with them and get feedback from them. And you'll see coming up here that based on some of that feedback that we received, I think it was last week, we made a couple of changes to the plan based on that feedback that we received from them.
Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
I wanted to clarify
Real
too.
quick, going forward, if you guys and gals could all write your questions down, and we'll do it at the end. I mean, it's pretty laid out here, so
Okay.
just continue on, and then we'll call for questions at the end.
And my question for Director Poston, if you don't mind, what would you suggest moving forward now that we've made that, in your comment, possible omission to begin with? What would you like us
Well,
to do?
I mean, it
moving
looks
forward?
like you're including the teachers
Sure.
down the line here, but my concern is why not have that teacher input right from the very start? Obviously, that can't be done now. We're too far along for that, but I would definitely rely on a lot of teacher input when you're doing this.
Thank you.
And can I just say, I want to tag on what, I want a classroom teacher. I don't want an innovator who doesn't work with students. I don't want people who are not directly in that classroom.
We got to keep this moving, though, so no more interruptions, and then we can talk about all this at the end, because we're going to have to give them feedback on what we want to see going forward.
But
I would
Dan-
assume that teachers aren't in the building in July anyway.
We pay.
But Dan, this is critical as we go along, so I don't want to throw this under the rug either. Okay.
I understand. Write your questions down because she might be able to answer them as they're going.
Thank you. Large scale systemic change must be initiated with that proven continuous improvement model. And TJ mentioned it in the opening. So for this reason, the early literacy team is using an evidence-based process called the Continuous Improvement Plan, or the SIP. After determining our current state in the area of early literacy in step 1, we moved on to step 2, which was identifying the strengths and barriers in the area of early literacy. By identifying our strengths in those areas, we're able to help capitalize on what is working and play off of that. So we had strengths in areas like our collaborative structures. We have all teachers are part of a collaborative teacher team, which we often call CTTs. They meet regularly to plan instruction, collaborate around student data, and determine next steps for their classroom. Every building also has a building student achievement team, which we call BSATs, and that's really the building leadership team. And then every building also has a student intervention team, which we sometimes refer to as a SIT. And they're planning interventions for specific students. So it's a group that comes together to review data for an individual student and help make decisions. We also have built-in time for professional development for all staff. In both pre-service in August as well as Wednesday early release throughout the school year. And then our elementary instructional minutes schedule is built to support an MTSS framework for evidence-based literacy practices. There's time built in the day to provide that quality core instruction and ensure that all students have an opportunity to receive interventions. Step 2 also aligns with another one of the Iowa Association of School Boards questions that asks, where are we making progress in early literacy and how do we know? As well as what early literacy wins can we celebrate? So after reviewing our strengths and barriers in Davenport in the area of early literacy, we work to create that plan, which is step 3, while simultaneously gathering feedback from different stakeholder groups using that feedback loop.
Thank you. Sorry, we lost the slideshow for a second. Okay, so that leads us to step 3 out of the 5 steps, which is create a plan. And that was obviously the bulk of the work that our committee was doing. And in step 3, we followed the 5 main pillars of looking at assessment and data-based decision-making, intervention systems, and infrastructure, coaching, universal instruction, and leadership. Within those, the team, when they met, created pieces of the plan to align with those five areas. And specifically within ADBDM, we really talked about the continued use of our early literacy data, not just the 3 screening windows, but the progress monitoring data, which will help us group students so that all students are growing and learning, whether they're at proficiency, above proficiency, or below proficiency based on that data. Secondly, we dug into our intervention systems, and you've heard mention of reading coaches and intervention people that help administer or work with small groups for intervention systems, and really digging into what are the roles of those people, what responsibilities do they have at the system and building level, and what resources do they need to do their job. One of the big things that came out of that work was conversations with our teacher leadership and compensation system about the prioritization of the innovators' time so that they can support students at a greater level during the school day, whether it's buildings will have a menu of options they can look at, but getting groups or helping teachers in the classroom with instruction. And then that also led to conversations about what resources we're using for interventions and if we need to look at more or different purchases to better align to what our students' data is telling us. In terms of infrastructure, that's the coaching piece. And so we were pleased to know that the new regional North, Central, West system that we have in place will allow for coaching for not just teachers, but for principals too, so that everyone involved in early literacy can get the support they need to help us achieve our goal. And then in terms of universal instruction, there was a group that did some resource mapping to see where the gaps kept showing up at in our early literacy data. And one of the materials that was being used wasn't a good match for our K-1-2 students in terms of the skills that they need at those grade levels, which led to the conversations around the 95% group materials, which you'll hear about later in this presentation. And then the last thing in terms of, let's see, I'm afraid to click now. I'm going to get into no person's land here. But this 21-22 professional learning calendar, which I believe is called the Big Dog. Is that right? Did I call that right? Anyway, something like that, lays out for everyone all of the different opportunities that teachers will have on Wednesday early outs, pre-service, et cetera, as well as with smaller groups for professional learning around early literacy. Okay, and then the last part is leadership, and there's sorry if you're looking, the systems of accountability is a tracking tool of sorts, really focused on who's responsible and who's accountable. And so you'll see here in each of these different areas, we have every one of the elementary schools, as well as, is it the instructional, is it the ILDs? Who's actually going to be checking on these things and when are they going to be checking on them? Because we recognize a plan is only as good as what do they say? What gets monitored gets done. So we need to be monitoring this plan and monitoring the work so we know when to adjust accordingly.
All right. All right, so we have the full early literacy implementation plan linked here on the slide, and then we included an example to show the roadmap of actions over multiple years. All of the actions are aligned to an outcome with timelines and accountability checks, and they've been identified over the course of 3 years in response to the need that this plan be long-term and something that can be sustainable versus a one-year initiative or ask of staff. This early literacy roadmap is for all students, including special populations like special education students, early childhood, English language learners, gifted and talented, and of course, our at-risk readers. Professional learning will include pre-K through 6th grade teachers, although the primary focus is pre-K 3. Pre-K 6 will engage and implement the different structures and processes in alignment with the pre-K 3 work. As we know, the board and DCSD believe the importance of early childhood education, specifically the prioritization of preschool. So we're wrapping early childhood into this plan intentionally, knowing that we'll be growing our program in DCSD in terms of participation, as well as enrollment in the statewide voluntary preschool program. We'll look at growth in early childhood literacy data as measured by kindergarten students who are proficient in the fall of their kindergarten year using the FAST early reading FAST assessment.
Okay, so that is the plan, the steps that were used to create the plan. And then with that being said, we needed to create some outcome goals and create SMART goals. And so you'll see there that the overarching goal is that by June of 2024, 80% of all third grade students in Davenport will meet the spring FAST CBM benchmark. And for those of you, I believe you're familiar with FAST is the state reading assessment that our students take. As a reminder, in the spring of 2021, April and May, when our third graders took the assessment, 55% of our students were proficient. So that is an ambitious goal. We recognize that to get from 55 to 80. But there are some stair-step increment goals you'll see in there of 60, 70, 80%. And as kind of a comparison, we talked about at the last meeting, while Davenport was at 55% this spring, the AEA, when they aggregated all the districts together, was at 64%, and the state of Iowa was at 66%. So while we have a long way to go to get to 80, we are not alone in that work. Everyone is digging in and trying to get to that 80% benchmark. And I have gotten some feedback just today. I think we got this, that people want to be able to see progress on this data in an apples to apples and an apples to oranges way, meaning we want to see how our third graders do every year, because that is a measure of our third grade curriculum. But we also want to see, I think about our kindergartners starting this year. I want to see them as a cohort, how they do from kindergarten to first grade to second to third, because there's sometimes there are places in your system where kids aren't making the expected growth, and that would be a time for us to dig in and figure out why. And as a reminder of when we made these SMART goals for our pre-K 3 students, most of those goals are focused on fluency, which is an important first step in the science of reading to become a fluent reader. However, with our older students, they also do take the A-reading assessment, which is an assessment that measures multiple pieces of literacy, including comprehension, language, grammar, etc. And then once we get the green light with these goals at the board level, district level, then buildings will dig in and set their goals based on their building data to try to get to the same outcomes as the district goals. The next step will be, once we've established those goals and buildings and district have set theirs and shared the plan, we're going to have some common understanding about how we'll know if we're on track. And so you'll see there are 4 big kind of buckets or areas of information that we are seeing as kind of our go-to sources as progress measures. And there are actually 6 healthy indicators according to the work that the Department of Education has done with us that help us know if our MTSS system for early literacy is on track and if it's effective. And that will give us, we have actually, if you dig into that plan, you'll see 6 or 7 specific ones measured out, meaning 90% of our students who are not proficient are getting weekly or biweekly progress monitoring. 80% of our students, as we said in 2024, will meet benchmark by 3rd grade. And then another one is we want 95% of our students who start the year where they should be to finish the year, not lose ground as the year goes along. We want to ensure that our students who are considered potentially at risk and that require progress monitoring and intervention are actually getting the interventions that they need. And we want our students that are non-proficient to grow to proficiency, as well as Tara mentioned. I'm really excited about the board's excitement around early childhood and preschool, and that you made that a priority last week. That speaks to my heart specifically as an administrator. And so as we grow participation within our preschool programs, we'll also be looking at growth and achievement, including how are those students performing when they come in September of kindergarten. We should be able to see in their early reading composite that they are ready for kindergarten. That will be, back to those IASB board questions, that would be a long-term evidence of our success, is that our kindergartners and kindergarten teachers' voices will hopefully be telling us that students are more ready for kindergarten than they ever have been.
All right. So there are a few things that will be different to the start of the school year. In the area of collaboration, at the teacher calibration meeting, there were concerns that were brought up about teacher prep time when we were vetting the plan with them and getting feedback from them. So we've reconfigured the plan to include 1 Wednesday early release per month, which is typically known as a district Wednesday to address literacy, which keeps time in the teacher week for math lesson planning. That was part of their concern that was brought up. When would they have time to plan for math as well? They'd be able to do their math data review with their common formative assessments and intervention planning as well. So we're honoring that teacher feedback and teacher prep time by keeping the required collaborative teacher team meeting to just once per week for literacy. And then we'll have 1 Wednesday per month dedicated to reading professional development and data analysis in support of this plan.
I'll do the next one too. Though this was exciting for me too, because BSAT Summit is a new thing for me as a new Davenport employee. And so I was excited to know that these two priority areas have now trickled into everything we do. It's how we think about how we're going to use our time. And so the BSAT Summit focus will be also on early literacy and or PBIS work underneath the MTSS framework, because we recognize that when principals come with their building leadership teams that day, they want to dig into this work and they want to be focused in what they do. And then with that time that they're going to have, our goal is that all students can begin receiving services, reading intervention, day one or within the first week of school. As we know, we do have new students and kindergartners who are going to need to get acclimated that first week. But in terms of our students that ended the year with us, we have their spring data and we can make decisions on where to give them the support that they need right away in August.
As part of the plan, we also engaged in a curriculum resource review. That information, along with our early literacy data, highlighted the need for an adjustment in our instructional resources. The 95% group who creates literacy instructional resources has an updated foundational skills product. This updated resource will create a more cohesive, explicit phonics and phonemic awareness instruction for students, which will accelerate their learning and then also help us to address the learning loss. The early literacy team is requesting that ESSER funds be utilized to support the acquisition of this early literacy resource to help us reach our goal for all Davenport pre-K3 students to become successful readers. This is being shared as an informational item tonight and will be brought to the board for action at the next board meeting. This action will increase our ability to be able to have the product available for teachers at the start of the school year. We had several positive comments from teachers at the teacher calibration team regarding this updated product. We were fortunate to be able to provide our students with a summer version of this product during our early literacy summer tutoring program for our kindergarten through third grade students. And we collected some data through both observation and some survey results. We were able to see some student gains this summer, and survey results from the early literacy teachers were overwhelmingly positive. We had 55 of them complete the survey, and 100% of them said that the program was easy to implement. 90% of them said that their prior 95% experience is what helped to make it easier to implement. The program was familiar to them. And 94% of them said that the student materials made it easier for the students to engage in the learning. We also had some summer visits, both virtual and in person, to be able to see these tutoring sessions and see the materials in use. And we, as soon as we walked in the door, encountered teachers asking for this program in their classroom during the school year. And then we also heard one first grade student comment during the lesson, asked her teacher, are we going to be able to get some of this for when we're in real school? Because she was engaged and liked the materials. So the purchase of this resource will allow teachers to provide instruction on foundational early literacy skills, which is what our FAST assessments are measuring, to their whole class. They'll be able to provide daily opportunities for students to make connections between those individual foundational skills that they're learning to what they're reading and writing. And it'll ensure efficient lesson planning for teachers by minimizing the number of curriculum resources that they have to pull from to do their lesson planning.
The last thing on this slide is what they'll notice that's different is, has been mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's the prioritization of the innovator's time as well as others in the building, such as teacher librarians, coaches, anyone who's able to help our students with reading will be asked to do so at greater and higher levels than they ever have before, because this is everyone's responsibility, obviously not just our classroom teachers. And principals and their BSATs are coming up with their own building-based responses to this request for to maximize their human capital. And then after the first reporting period, we will pull data and look for some shining stars and where are we getting maximum results for the effort, and then hopefully be able to share and learn from each other, either within the regions or across the regions, as to how certain schools are getting XYZ results in kinder, first, second. And then we'll bring that, if we need to make changes in that, we'll bring that back to Oversight Committee too, to talk about any more changes that might be needed.
So the curriculum resource, Sorry. This is the what? The curriculum resource review. And we know that our priority action of resource review is what led us to the decision of needing to update our 95% literacy resource and materials. We know that as new plans are created, that can mean new pieces are added on. And we wanted to ensure that we're not adding more without considering what it would remove. So we followed that curriculum resource mapping process to identify where are our holes, where are the gaps in our resources, and where are there redundancies. And if we add the updated 95% group foundational skills resource, we can take things off the plates of teachers. This resource is research and evidence-based. It includes explicit instruction for all students in all foundational skill areas, which eliminates the needs for teachers to have to lesson plan from multiple places like they currently do, with things like Letter at Day, Haggerty Phonemic Awareness, the Phonics Chip Kit, Wonders Handwriting Instruction, the High Frequency Word Routine. Those pieces are all built into the 95% foundational skill. They're able to do it more efficiently because it's taking the skill and making connections between the skill, to the letter formation, to reading it in text, and then writing their own sentences as well. So they're able to be a bit more efficient.
Okay, which brings us to almost the very end. So in summary, this is what's happening in early literacy, and here are our next steps. We're asking that the board have discussion tonight after we finish this presentation about our proposed request to use ESSER funds to purchase K-3 literacy phonics materials. And then we will come back to the board and ask for action on that item on August 9th. We, in summary, are telling you, the board, that we will be giving you benchmark period updates with data as our fall, winter, and spring assessments come in. And that we've committed to professional development for not just teachers, but for our teacher leaders through the TLCS system and for our administrators. We really do believe in the power of our instructional leadership skills of our building principals and want them to be in the know just as much as our teachers. And then fourthly, one thing I'm really excited about is this idea of having a curriculum showcase opportunity where board members can come into the schools and visit with a focus, so to speak, similar to what Director Postrom was saying, but with a focus of we're going to go in and look at early literacy in action in kindergarten. We're going to look at PBIS in action in 3rd grade or 8th grade, whatever it may be, because I do feel like you need to see it, right? Versus just us telling you about it or hearing about it in your local neighborhood or community. And then next steps too is that larger group that we shared on slide 3 or 4, that is your early literacy implementation team, which duly noted did not include teachers. We'll continue to have weekly meetings as well as inclusion of the ILDs so that we get regional support across the buildings. And I'm going to challenge myself and those teams to get back together and figure out how we can incorporate teacher voices more intentionally moving forward. I know we have subs as an issue in the district. We don't want to pull teachers out of the classroom, but we definitely want to make sure that the plan is workable and is able to be molded to meet the data and the qualitative and quantitative feedback we're getting from teachers. So I guess just in closing, I'd like to say that I hope you heard that we collaborated and then we collaborated again and we collaborated again. We've been collaborating a lot, and that we are very focused on ensuring that people understand what responsibility they have around early literacy and who's accountable. That's part of my title as the Director of Learning Results. And so as much as I need to know that, so does everyone else within the system. And I would like to just say thanks because I know this was a long presentation and you've already been having your workshop since 5:30, and we are willing to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Director Hayes.
I need clarity. Maybe Tara? You had mentioned the one Wednesday a month. Is that for everyone or just K to 3?
That would be for our K-6, so that our 4th through 6th grade teachers can replicate that learning within their grade levels as well.
Okay, my next one was you also with accountabilities. For the schools that were listed on there, you had the villages on there, but what about the schools with the pre-K programs on there? Is that like, example, Truman? Truman was there on a school. Would Truman also be listed as a pre-K as well?
Yes, so they'll have whatever grades they serve, they'll have data that lifts up into that accountability matrix.
I think you kind of pretty much hit on the cabinet versus the instructional cabinet. Okay, so you had mentioned K to 3, there would be more than one teacher, and there would be, is there like one teacher for 4 on and more than one? How is that working?
So we have teacher work teams that were developed last summer in response to the return to learn. And on those teacher work teams, there's multiple teachers at each grade level. So for this particular instance, we invited multiple at K3 because of the focus on the early literacy work, and then selected at least one at the other grade levels, and including all the way up through high school as well, because there was some mention of PBIS. So we wanted to get their input in that as well.
Now, are those the lead teachers or just?
No, they're classroom teachers. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
And they've been a sounding board for curriculum specialists throughout the return to learn, through everything from updating a district benchmark assessment to the pacing guide to things like these literacy plans.
Okay, thank you.
Director Poston.
On the chart with curriculum resource review, could you tell me the core instruction that's being pulled, how long have they been in effect? When were those curriculums purchased?
So they vary. Haggerty has been around for a long time, probably 10 years. And the next one, Enhanced Alphabet Knowledge, has probably been around for two years. And High Frequency Word Routine is part of Wonders. And 95% Chip Kit, I'm not exactly positive, but probably 8 years, I'm guessing. And it's kind of come and gone as to when we needed it in core, when we didn't. So it was part of our core, and then we pulled it out for a little while because we had adopted Wonders. And our hope was that Wonders was going to be explicit enough for our students. Our data showed that it wasn't, so we put it back in. And then Kilpatrick is something that is newer within the last couple of years as well. It's similar to Haggerty, so some buildings choose to do both, some do one or the other. And then Wonders has been, I think, about 6 years, 5 or 6 years now.
I just wanted to say too, as a new person seeing that, it was a little concerning as to how a system responded to how to teach kids how to read. And so that led to some questions about what is the curriculum adoption cycle in Davenport? What does board policy say? Are we on a 6-year or 7-year? Are we buying elementary and secondary simultaneously? Do we focus on math, then social studies and science? And so unfortunately, I didn't find a lot of real clear answers to those types of questions. And they go to what Director Poston was saying, is that if you have a team that is teacher-based with administrator input that studies over the course of a year best practices in adoption of a math curriculum, adoption of Wonders in this example, you then can feel comfortable as a board that we are presenting to you the very best resource that's out there for students. And we invest, it'll be a lot of money. There'll be a lot of money invested in math books, science books, whatever it may be. But with the idea that that's what our commitment is for 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years is a general cycle in most districts. And that would eliminate what feels piecemeal, I'm sure, to teachers, like this, this we didn't work, but kind of didn't work, and this building likes to use that, and that building likes to use that. I think there's still a place in some cases for these materials. They're not getting thrown in the garbage by any means, for interventions for students who are not responding to the items on the left. But in general, we'd want a system level response to how kids learn to read. These are the resources we would use because we need to address these standards, and these assessments are going to measure whether we did it or not.
Well, when I made my visits, I sensed frustration from principals and teachers both that the district just keeps throwing a new curriculum at them, and then they have to learn that, and then you get another curriculum, and it's just on and on and on. So when you go to this 95% group and you've already got, you're dropping whatever it is, part of a program from 95% group, explain to me, what's going on here?
Okay. So the 95% group that we're dropping was put in as an intervention, and it was intended to be for small group intervention. So we worked with consultants from the company to make adjustments to it so that we could use it in a whole group setting. Because of that, it still didn't fit what we fully needed for all of our students to cover those foundational skills. So when we did the curriculum resource review, that's what really highlighted that for us, is we saw the gaps and wonders, and we knew about those, and that's why we put 95% in, but then we didn't, but because the 95% wasn't a true foundational skill, it was just that specific phonics skill, we were also then having to put additional pieces in. So it ended up being we were trying to just put one thing in, but we ended up putting 5 things in. 95% has since come out with their foundational program, which embeds all of the foundational skills versus what we were initially trying to do of just supplementing the one piece.
So if this curriculum is going to address the entire class, explain to me how you're going to break that down as far as the, talented and gifted, the average student, and then the students that really have a real tough time learning needs.
So this new program is developed for whole class implementation, where the previous one that we were using was not. We were having to make those modifications for it. So it wasn't able to engage kids on a variety of levels based on that. This new program will, and it will be able to hit at that individual skill level, which is what our struggling learners need, but also take it all the way to reading and writing within text, which is what our advanced learners really need.
So you feel confident that the talented and gifted won't be bored by this program, and that, but it'll also meet the needs of the students with the greatest needs.
I do. This is also just one piece of our core. It's not our core program. We still have wonders where they will read texts that help them build their background knowledge on different topics by different authors, develop their oral language skills and their writing skills, doing narrative text and writing opinion papers, things like that. So this is just one piece, about 25 to 30 minutes of their language arts block. It wouldn't be the entire time. So there will be lots of opportunities for teachers to differentiate for those students who need a little bit more or who need some additional scaffolds.
So describe to me a day in that classroom. So students come in, you adopt this program. Explain to me how that class is going to be handled. Say they've got a third talented, gifted, a third average, and a third well below average. Tell me how that class is going to be handled.
So this is very common, right? You're approving big purchases and you have big questions about it. And that's kind of what I was trying to highlight in Curriculum Showcase. Like, instead of us telling you what you're going to see, we'd love for you to come see it, or allow us to have teachers take a peek in their classrooms and make videos, because
I will be there.
That's awesome. I look forward to that, because I think that it's it's where the rubber meets the road, right? It's the day-to-day use by teachers and how students are responding, because we can tell you how the product says that it should be used and utilized, and the results that are received for districts that have used it in the past. But we want to make sure that Davenport teachers have the training they need to do it at the same levels, and that we're not allowing it to be up to chance, so to speak, about what the outcomes will be.
But I guess, my question is what kind of teacher power are we going to have here? I mean, are we going to have more interventionists, or how is that one teacher going to handle that classroom situation?
My understanding was that there was a desire to hire reading interventionists, but at least this summer with ESSER funds, but that we were not able to realize that given the limited pool of candidates. Did I catch that right, TJ?
Yes.
Thank you. But long term, yes, that's definitely, I know I've heard at meetings that that's something that we hope to look for at semester, maybe reaching new graduates or others that could help fill in some of the gaps and make our delivery of reading interventions more equitable versus equal at each school.
Well, just one last question then. How confident do you feel after looking at a number of curriculums that we've gone through? How confident do you feel on this 95% group?
I don't have, 95%. Their focus is early literacy. That is their focus. Wonders was a great curriculum adoption, but it's a very broad adoption. So they are trying to serve our lowest kindergarten students and our highest achieving sixth grade students. So it's very broad. This is focused on early literacy. That is their goal. Their goal is that 95% of students, our goal was 80%, their goal is 95% of students can be successful readers.
I think some of the feedback that we've gotten from different places has been that programs are programs. And so I do have a lot of confidence in this program. But what I have more confidence in is that we have a really strong team that's going to help teachers, because like you have pointed out, we can have the best product out there that costs, the highest, the Cadillac of it all. But if teachers don't feel supported in terms of what their learning is and the resources they need, or if these folks behind me, if we are too busy for whatever reason to listen to principals and work with them and get through the hard parts of an implementation, then you're never going to see a return on investment. You're never going to get that back on the money that you spent. And so the product that she's talking about is, I was reading through the 57 surveys and the things that teachers were saying. And granted, that's a small section. I get that. And it's not every teacher, but it was just encouraging to see in a summer like we've had, teachers expressing such positivity about getting back to school and getting kids in class and getting them reading again after everything that we've gone through in the last 16 or so months of the pandemic.
Well, I think part of the frustration was, lack of support, and it just, a program was thrown out to them and then not supported. And I think, hopefully they'll have the support, but I still think bottom line is the person in that classroom teaching that is the most critical area. And so we've got to focus on that. So anyway, I appreciate your answers to my questions. Thank you.
I would like to follow up a little bit with that. As a elementary principal for many years, the most frustrating thing for a teacher is when you're trying to teach this very complex early literacy components without the right tools, because that is a huge barrier to many of our students in Davenport, is that the science of reading, the acquiring, the hearing and production of sounds and turning sounds into symbols, and that is absolutely complex. And when we adopted Wonders, there were holes in it. The best way I've ever heard it described is it's like a vitamin. People take a vitamin because they're missing something, and that was a really good way to describe it. And those are excellent questions, because if it's not because of it's not because we want to busy people. It's because people really want to help close that literacy gap. And so if someone says this program will do it, and this, so I really applaud the effort of taking this away to do this, to fill this hole that we have. And so I remember countless hours with kindergarten and first grade teachers, like, how are we going to close this gap? And so I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Director Beck.
Thank you. So I had some of the same questions as Director Poston. I remember sitting here my very first year as a board member, hearing about the next shiny new program and asking a question about program jumping, which isn't unique to Davenport. I mean, that's just a thing that happens in education. So I am happy to hear that this has similarities to stuff that the teachers are already using. I sort of feel the same way that Director Poston does when I see things that have only been in place for a short period of time. I do appreciate that you had a bit of a pilot study this summer, and I think that's important. And I think it would be really helpful to maybe formalize those data, just so that people can see that, yes, we have used this before and it's doing what we think it will do, because we are going to make a commitment. The last thing we want to do is have to have this discussion again in 2 years because it's just not working, right? But I appreciate the fact that you've taken into consideration the teacher feedback and even the anecdotal student evidence, which is important, but it's anecdotal. I guess my suggestion in the future for curriculum purchases in general might be to run a pilot before we are purchasing, right? Which I guess would be kind of like part of the year-long curriculum study, right? So that's just something to put in our long-range plan, yet another thing. So my other question is, first of all, I love that the interventions are beginning right away and you're not going to wait. That is so, so, so important. I guess I have two more questions. How are families going to be brought into this? Because part of what makes early literacy successful is reinforcement in the home. Whether those parents know how to read or not, the opportunity to read, to have books in a home, especially in that pre-K and kindergarten age group, how are families going to be brought into this to make it as successful as it can be? Or is that something we haven't planned out yet?
I love that question. That's one I'll definitely bring back to the principal group, and they'll be the experts on their local school communities and can give us some ideas on how teachers can share information with families. Maybe it's back to school night, I don't know, fall parent teacher conferences, but definitely getting that information out there.
Okay. So that kind of leads into my last question. I know I mentioned this before. We have a lot of community partners who are willing to help. Board members have participated in things. I know there's a lot of people in the community who, given the opportunity, would volunteer their time for, a district-wide reading day or, come read with a kid at this lunch or whatever, So I would encourage you to take advantage of those connections, and because I know this is I appreciate everything that you explained to us, and I'm happy to see that it's evidence-based and data-driven, and you've answered a lot of the concerns. But a lot of it is just about the more you read, the better you read, right? And so having, just kind of wrapping everybody around, everybody in a big reading hug, I feel like would be, I don't know if that's the right way to frame it.
I think that goes back to our comments about preschool too, because it is absolutely that first step in the door of developing oral language and learning social emotional regulation and turn taking and listening and speaking, and some of the science of reading that TJ was talking about. So, the more time that kids have in our system, the more ready they will be to be readers by third grade.
I also appreciate the data points that you're going to bring to us and that you have actual numbers for goals. That's the first time I've seen that in a while, and I really appreciate that because with those quantitative measurements, we can see success and we can see things that we need to work on. And so I think we're moving in the right direction there. So thank you guys so much for your presentation. I really appreciate all the information you're bringing to us.
Director Klein-Jerome.
I've seen innovators before they were called innovators, whatever their name was at the time. Some take the approach, working with kids is not my job now that I'm in this. And I know others. I have a very good friend who, if she sees the need, works with kids. I'll take this small group and work with them, or I'll take this individual. I am glad to see innovators going to be working with kids, because I don't believe the program should have been set up where, working with kids isn't my job, it's to work with teachers only. But my question is, do we have to rewrite our plan for the state because we are also changing the way our TLC is going to be run?
That is why we had that TLC Oversight Committee meeting a couple weeks ago to try to, we had, one of the lead teachers had sent out a draft of an idea to the group so we could get some comments and feedback. And we did end up dialing it back quite a ways, to your point of our ask was half of their day working with students if that's what the building data indicated was needed. And we compromised at a lower level than that, which is why I've said we're going to dig back in and look at the data after the first quarter or first window of time, because we might have to go back and talk about it again, because there are adults in the building that could be helping with students reading in addition to volunteers and parents. And we want to make sure that that's our focus, that everyone has that sense of urgency.
I 100% agree there. I feel, you say 4 to 6 are also included in this, but I don't feel like we're really including them. It's kind of like an afterthought. So what are we doing for these 4-6? Because we've seen their scores and they also need help. So what specifically are we doing to help out these 4 through 6?
So some of the processes that they're using in K3, they'll be able to replicate in 4 through 6 with their data, as well as the professional development around the science of reading. We still have 4 through 6 graders that are struggling readers. So for our 4th through 6th grade teachers to understand how reading develops, it will help them to be able to identify where do they need to intervene, and what is the best way for them to intervene. So having that professional development and that background knowledge will help them to understand where a kid is and what I might need to be able to do to help move them forward.
Are we giving them additional resources, and are we offloading things that we did for the K3, or?
Not at this time that we've talked about. It's the professional development and making good use of the resources that are available. There are pieces, we do have some 95% group products that are available for intervention that they can use if their data shows a need, or if they have a group of students that show a need, as well as within Wonders. There's some phonics resources that they could pull and would be available. At this time, we haven't talked about an additional purchase.
Thank you. I noted that one because I do think that's something we probably haven't had enough time talking about to be more detailed in what their needs are.
I saw in your presentation, day 1, class-wide intervention. That to me sends up a flag that says one size fits all. So that concerns me that you would assume the whole class needs that intervention. So I would tread lightly in that and really focus on the kids that do need that intervention and don't assume they all need it. That to me as a teacher, I would not like it. You said you have to do this to all the kids. Some of them don't need it. So class-wide always makes me nervous. The other thing, a couple things. One of the barriers you listed was siloed departments. I'm assuming that I'm the math and science teacher and somebody else is the reading teacher. Why is that a barrier?
I think when that came out, when the team was working, it was thinking about not just departmentalization, but the special ed department or the English learners or the Title I reading coaches. It's different groups reporting to different people versus, hey, here's our third graders at Wilson. Who serves third graders? And how can we use these tools like the UTT to make an intervention is an interesting word to me. I know everyone continues to say walk to intervention, but if it's really an MTSS system, it allows for enrichment too. So for students who already have it, what can they be doing during that time to expand their literacy skills? So I think that was what we were talking about with silos, is just making sure that there might be within departments too, but within a grade level, but it's also the departments of the district and how they exist or do not exist within a building in terms of collaboration.
And I know, Lisa, you were not around when Wonders was adopted. I was not on the board, nor was I teaching when it came about. But I'll tell you, I know the cost that goes into a curriculum. And to say, we knew when we purchased this there were gaps. Whoever allowed that to go through, that's a huge mistake. You're asking us for 95%. It's a lot of money. And I want to make sure that you truly believe there are no gaps. I don't want to fund 4 other programs because 6 months from now we go, oh, there was a gap there, we didn't catch it. And I know it's important, we got to get this going. But financially, we also need to say, is this really going to work without having to buy this and fill in and this fill in? So just please make sure that, anything we're adopting, and I have teacher friends that have said, this was never a good curriculum, and we put a lot of money into it. So, I live the treasures route, but let's at least not rush into anything.
Mr. President?
I was just getting ready to call on you, Director Potts.
Well, see, we are like in mental sync.
That's it.
Oh, that's scary. That's scary. Couple of things. First, I'm pleased to see that we're going back to phonics. It seems that phonics has been in and out and in and out over the course of the last 40 or 50 years. The 95% curriculum was adopted about 8 or 9 years ago. Julie Suyetsky was the curriculum coordinator at the time. It was adopted as a reading intervention program to diagnose gaps in reading skills and then remediate them. And when I was at Sudlow, we employed that very effectively with a lot of success. So successful that I would harp on her to find a similar program for math interventions, and they never could. So I have no problem with the 95% group. I saw it. I saw the teachers use it. I saw kids' reading improve as a result of it. The other, I guess, commentary as opposed to question I have is, we have 55% of our kids that are proficient. It is my hope, my aspiration, and my expectation that while we are focusing on the 45% of the children who can't yet read on grade level, we are not allowing the 55% who can to not be stimulated and or accelerated. I think the other side of the remediation coin is, what are we doing to accelerate those kids who can read, and will strive academically? Because I've said this before, Nobody's going to move to Davenport to send their kids to our schools because we have a great 95% remediation reading program. Okay? They'll do that because we have an acceleration program where their kid everybody moves to think their kid's a genius, will be accelerated, will be challenged, will be stimulated. And I think, obviously the focus of our conversation this evening is on getting those kids who can't read yet to read, because reading is a crucial skill. But let's not forget the other side of that coin. The other side of that coin is the kids who can and will accelerate and achieve academically, we need to make sure we are providing for them also. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Director Potts. Any other questions? Director Beck.
Just a quick kind of short one that piggybacks a little bit on Director Potts. So he mentioned, making sure we don't lose the students that are already proficient. We've had an emphasis on culturally responsive teaching. I think I'm using the right term. Have we made sure that the images, stories, and language in this product represent all of our students?
In the 95% product?
Yes.
I have not, no.
Before we make this purchase, can we make sure that this is representative of all of our students?
Yes.
Absolutely. We will work on that immediately so that you have that to make your decision next week.
Thank you.
My guess is yes, but guesses don't.
I would assume
Don't
at this
do it.
point that they probably all do, but you never know. And I am not going to spend this much money on something that doesn't reflect everyone.
Agreed. Thank you.
Director Hayes.
This is kind of an offline question here, but for this shipping and handling, for $25,000, almost $26,000, we could almost walk there and pick it up for less. Is that negotiable?
Dan and I talked about getting a trailer.
I got a truck. Who else got a truck? We'll just
We know
drive up.
Kent's got them.
We can check on it.
Okay.
I'm laughing because I actually had a similar thing came up when I was a principal, and I was like, I'll drive a truck to Texas for that much money to get
Well,
the
it's in
materials.
Illinois, Lincolnshire, Illinois.
Yeah, I'm not. Is that where their
We have
production
done-
is?
I
Yeah.
would have thought farther east, but we have done that. We have done that before. Gone and picked up the books and brought them back versus
I will drive
their shipping.
Kent's truck.
We just have to have them for teachers by August 19th. That's the biggie.
I'm on summer vacation, and there's a bunch of retired people here too.
I got to go to Wichita, Kansas next week, so I'm only 8 hours out from that. So I'm just saying. Any other questions? I have a few. I do want to stress the involvement of teachers. So I would hope the next time you come to kind of give us an update, you have a few teachers with you to kind of it. And by no means do I mean to. I don't want to come off disrespectful or anything like that. But they're the actual people in the classroom doing it. You could bring a principal all you want, but that principal is telling them what to do, and they're in their office, another classroom, whatever. They're not actually in there physically doing it, working with the kiddos. So I would definitely like to see that. A couple takeaways from me. I am glad that you guys have the assessment database decision making. It's almost like a SWOT analysis that I've been preaching for at least a year and a half, 2 years to get. So at least we're making some progress there. I do like the early literacy plan, the system of accountability where you had all the buildings, who's accountable for it. When you actually hold someone to something, they're more likely to get something done and get results. So I really appreciated that. Hopefully we'll be able to see updates on that as we go on with this. And then the professional learning for the pre-K to 6th grade teachers, will the building principals and Sam's be involved with that as well, because if the teacher's being taught how to do it well, if they have questions or something, I would hope that their building staff would be involved in that.
My battery ran out. That's a sign. Yes, we actually just talked about that this afternoon, about the importance of mapping this backwards so that we, before this gets in front of teachers on a Wednesday, that we've had a chance for the BSAT, but more importantly, the principal in the building to have had the knowledge and learning ahead of time, so he or she feels comfortable being the leader of that work in front of teachers on Wednesdays with assistance from, the curriculum specialists and our ILDs.
Thank you. And then a couple other things. So like the SMART goals, I know we're at 55%, and then you had 60%, and then 70 and 80. My question is why is it only 5% the first year instead of 10? Because myself, I would like to see it be at 70% and then 80% by 2023. I mean, if we're investing a lot of money into this program and we're only going to see a 5% increase, I mean, I understand you don't want to set the bar too high so it looks like you failed, but I'm just kind of curious on the rationale with that.
In a typical year, yes, I would approach goal setting the exact same way, which is you're going to see your biggest bump, right, with an initial implementation, and then you'll stair step after that at smaller increments. But with COVID, the kids that are current second graders, right, or last year's first and second graders took the biggest brunt, and at least in my opinion, of everyone in our learning system across the country, because that's, in many cases they miss the end of kindergarten, which is when they start putting it all together, and then in first grade when they start reading text. And so we're cautiously optimistic that kids are going to bounce back, and we still have the unknown of how many kids are going to pick online only versus how many kids will be in our classrooms. So that's kind of the cautious conservative goal that we set of 5%. That was the reasoning behind that. But if the board would like us to do something different in that area, we can.
Okay. It just stood out to me. So, and then along those lines with the goals, were other staff and teachers involved with that? Because obviously they're going to be the ones. I mean, at the end of the day, the building principal is held accountable for that, but it's going to be the staff. Do you think you can get your kiddos to this level? Do you have enough resources and all that?
Right. And for some buildings, this is a huge stretch, and for others, it's not so much. And so that's where I was saying, once we get this identified as the district goal or the board goal, then buildings will do that same work over the next month or so, and we'll have different goals, but that's our job, is to help guide and support the goal setting process so that they're not, overshooting their SMART goal or underestimating their kids either.
Okay. And I'm assuming when you said the board needs to set that goal, that's one of the things that we can do for you, to set that goal so you can kind of move forward.
Or give us feedback, right? And if you'd like us to increase it or not.
Okay. And then the last thing that I had, when everyone was kind of talking about working with the community partners with reading and things like that, I did a thing with United Way a couple years ago. I want to say it was called Velo or something, and we would get on a computer, and at lunchtime or whatever, a kiddo would hop on and read to you. Because a lot of big corporations and companies, they get a pretty good little kickback if their employees do community service and stuff like that. Your John Deere's and your Arconics, all of their upper echelon, they're actually required, I believe, to be on, nonprofit boards and volunteer time and everything like that. So that could be a great resource to utilize. And I could be totally wrong with the name, but I just know
that's it.
We got on a computer, headphones on, because then you can do it right from your desk at work or whatever. And then the kid would read to you, and if they needed help, you can kind of help them out. And then plus it gives people all the feel goods that, hey, I got to help out, or and it's always anyone who has kids or grandkids, it's always a cool thing when your kid wants to hop up in your lap and read to you or something like that. you don't get that time back, so eventually they're a little bit older and then they're giving you grandkids and things like that. But if that's something that we could do to help out too with the outside resources, I mean, that would be a great thing as well. And I think I got my list. Director Poston.
On one of the superintendent's Friday reports, you sent out some data on the summer school. Can I share some of that?
Sure.
Okay. So this is for kindergarten through second grade, and students were identified as far as a need. And so and I'm not going to mention school names or anything, but so here's 111 students where there was a need, 11 students enrolled. So that's just 10% of the kids got involved. Okay, and we spent a lot of money on this summer school program. And spent a lot of time setting it up, and I think it was a good program. But you look at this, and why didn't more students get involved in this? There was also, they got 2 meals a day, correct? And they were offered transportation if they couldn't get there, okay? So when you look at this, the Iowa Association of School Boards and the state will say, well, you shouldn't be using that as an excuse. And I get that. We shouldn't be, okay? But that is the uphill battle that we face. So if there's not that support there, all you've got is 6 hours in that school day to touch that kid and try to improve with that child. That's going to be tough. And that's why those teachers need the support. And that's why some of the concerns that were brought up as far as this 95% group, we got to make sure we get this right, because there's been mistakes made in the past. But for some of these school buildings, that 55% or 60% after a while, that's going to be tough because of this. And that's where we've got, it still comes down to that teacher in the classroom and what support that we can give to her or him.
Mr. President?
Director Potts.
Yeah, I'm glad Kent referred to that report that we received, because when I read through that myself, I thought, that's pathetic. We had parents who could have sent their children to summer school to get extra help and everything else, and the percentages were dismal. They were dismal. It's mind-boggling to me why a parent wouldn't take advantage of it. You got transportation, you got education, and you got food. Send your kid to get some help, for crying out loud. Someone needs to go and smack some parents up the side of the head, as far as I'm concerned.
I think
I guess that'll make the paper tomorrow. Although the paper guy's probably gone long ago.
He's probably
But
watching from the comfort
think
of his
about that,
own
though.
house.
When you think about that, why wouldn't you take advantage of that opportunity? Because these schools, they called all these parents and laid it out for them. I just find that so frustrating, so almost demoralizing. That old expression, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. Well, like you can lead a kid to reading, but you can't make him read. The kid's got to be there, for crying out loud.
I think that speaks to the work we need to do to create partnerships, as you were saying, and connect families, because I don't presume to understand why the 100 people didn't come. I don't know if that's our place to talk about that necessarily, because I think everyone has their own situation and we know about this much of it. And as you said, we have time. We have those 30 days, so not 30 days, 30 hours a week or so all school year to get this done. So that's why we should focus on addressing, absenteeism and the things we can do during the school year, because summer programming, it's not just a Davenport phenomena. It's kind of lost its luster. It's really hard to get kids to commit to that. There's a million other things that families are choosing to do instead. And we keep going back to the same model. And so maybe it's time to rethink that, because we know that they need support, but they're not buying the product that we're putting out there right now. So I think that can only be done through questioning and conversations about how can we be partners in the process, and not be maybe putting our own bias on the situation of, well, I would have done that, or my friend would have done that. Why didn't they do that?
Thank you. I guess I would like to see a survey or something sent out to, hey, why didn't this was offered? Why weren't you able to do that? But to get back on topic with the early literacy plan, did anyone have anything else about the early literacy plan? Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything else, or are you ready for the next item?
The next agenda item is the 95% group, and I think that we kind of bled that into our presentation. So if I may steal one of your lines, President Goza, is there any additional information that the school board would need to act on the program?
Director Poston?
So you're talking about the purchase now, the program.
Yeah.
Well, definitely, I don't want to pay $25,000 to have this delivered to us. That's ridiculous. Okay. The other thing is do we negotiate with these companies at all? I mean,
Absolutely, we do.
if it was my, we're in this is a business. We're in the business to educate our kids. Okay. So sometimes I just feel so frustrated that we're not treating it like a business. I would go back to this company and say, we're not going to pay that, but we'll pay this amount. There's got to be some flexibility in here. There has to be. I mean, otherwise we're just being held hostage all the time to whatever. They see a school district come along, yeah, we're going to stick it to them, There's got to be some negotiating going on here.
I want to reassure you that we absolutely do that. We never accept anyone's first price, and that is absolutely part of our process. And Tara, if you can speak to where this started and where it's ended.
Yeah, we originally it was closer to 400,000, a little over actually, but we were able to split out the teacher. We wanted additional supplies for innovators to be able to push in for our special education teachers, for our English language learners. And so we were able to split out the student materials so that they weren't bundling in that cost, which was able to bring our costs down and get the additional resources that we needed.
So did you have to sacrifice anything then by changing that? No.
No, we were able to get all that so we have materials for each grade level for 1,200 students, which gives us a buffer for new students coming in, as well as additional. I think we ended up with 23
For the innovators.
23 additional teacher books, so that gives us a couple extra for every building.
Okay, thank you.
Director Potts, did you have any questions on this to proceed with voting on this at the next meeting?
No, I experienced the 95% remediation program when I was a principal at Sudlow for those years, and it worked for a whole bunch of kids. So I have no hesitation about this.
Thank you, Director Potts. Any other information needed to feel comfortable on voting on this on the 9th? Director Hayes.
I just needed information about the shipping. That's it.
Yeah. We are not voting tonight, correct? This is information only. We're voting next week.
This is informational.
Okay. So we can follow up on the shipping. I think that's the only thing that I'm hearing.
Any questions that our school board has on this, send them to me and we'll absolutely aggregate those and get an answer. Whether it be in a Friday report or if the board wants it in public, we'll put it in the public on the 9th.
I'm assuming the surrounding theme was the shipping cost, especially when it's only coming from like 2 hours away,
2 hours and 51 minutes.
almost 3 hours away. I could do that on a work trip. Just saying. Any other? That's the last item. All right, Director Potts, I will start on you. What are your? Oh,
Is there
never
something-
mind. I'm sorry.
ESSER process.
We have
Hold
another
on. I'm looking right at it too, and I just circle slashed it.
Do you want
I apologize. We're gonna move on to
Yes.
the ESSER process.
Thank you guys so much for your time tonight sharing this huge plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks
I
for
was putting the cart
Thanks for
before
your
the horse.
feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It's the questionnaire.
Yeah.
Do they need copies?
No.
Okay.
So I wanted to put this before the school board and kind of explain questions 1 through 4, and then seek some kind of input. So what the requirements for the district are to do is we have to fill out this ESSER questionnaire inside of CASA. And I wanted to explain what CASA is. CASA is the consolidated application. It's basically a one-stop shop for where we upload information to the Department of Ed, and then that's where they give us feedback. They also aggregate information to help them make decisions throughout the state. And so our requirements for the upcoming school year is to give them feedback, give them information on how did we gather information, and then what are our priorities as we move forward. As I stated in the Friday report, the landscape for COVID is constantly changing, and we do not know what's coming at us. So when we look at this, I think it's the perspective. I think we should take the perspective of not eliminating anything on this sheet to keep it open for us. So as we look at this sheet, if we click it doesn't mean we have to do it. It just means that we're considering it. And so what I would like to have today is some feedback from the school board. So I'm going to go through questions 1 through 4, and then I'd like to have some feedback from the school board. And from there, I have to input whatever we say into the consolidated application process. So before we get into the meat of it, I will kind of walk through what we have done. So question 1 is, how did we consult stakeholder groups? In December and January, we did a pretty extensive district-wide, it was very comprehensive work to determine what are the next steps. We surveyed our staff members. The union did a survey. We had each building leadership team meet with their teachers and then go out into their teacher teams. And so we got this very comprehensive feedback from our families. And from there, we've had that information and the next steps all along the way. So we've utilized focus groups, we've utilized surveys, and most recently we sent out another survey just to capture if there's anything that has changed, because obviously the landscape has changed. When you look at what kind of data that did we utilize, and that goes to questions 2, 3, and 4, you saw the data that went into developing the early literacy plan. And as we bring the PBIS plan forward, you'll see that the behavior, the learning, the conditions for learning, all of those things are utilized in implementing that. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is you saw the steps of the continuous improvement process, which means it's not a one and done. We're going to continue to put that stuff inside of our process of reviewing data. And you saw the cycle of bringing the literacy data 3 times. That's a continuous process for us. So steps 1 through 4, as a district, we've done really well seeking the input of our staff members, of our community. What is it that they want to see next? And just for an added bonus, we sent out something additional this past week to gather anything that's different. So So coming into to questions 5 through 7. These are the different options and things that districts should be thinking about as we move forward. And I'm not going to read these to you as I gave them to you in the Friday report, and they're here with you today. But I really wanted to hear from the board about, the comment that I said earlier. I believe that we should click as many of these as possible to have the ability to use that on help us prioritize what it is exactly that we want to do. Now, with that being said, our plan, as stated in the first paragraph, is that we are going to focus on early literacy and PBIS, and that is the overall umbrella for the multi-tiered system of support. What if somebody isn't all the way through our continuum in early literacy and all the way through continuum in our behavior and our behavior system? Focusing on those two things will help us really work on our disproportionality. It'll help improve our early literacy skills, all of those things. The other key components is the health and safety and lost and unfinished learning. So you'll notice that that's kind of the focus that Davenport Schools has had all along this journey, and that's the focus that we will continue to have. And so I'd like to take this opportunity now to get feedback from the school board and how best to move forward with this.
Mr. President,
Director Potts.
I agree with the superintendent. Fill that thing out generically. I don't think we should spend any of this money, though, on something that is a continuing expense because it won't be there later. I also think we should consider a portion of these funds to be spent on those, because not only did lower performing students suffer, higher performing students suffered. They missed out on opportunities. They missed out on expectations or experiences. So maybe we need to look at a way to also address the needs of some of those kids who are in the higher performing groups.
Thank you, Director Potts. My understanding is if you checked all of these things, if we were to, change course and it would still come to the board for approval, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then it could be like, well, no, our focus is supposed to be this.
I think it's important. That's an excellent question. And I think it's important for us to know that the board is strictly focused on PBIS, early literacy, health and safety, and lost learning. And so really, this is how we plan to utilize it according to the state. But what is strategically being brought before the school board is, what are we doing for early literacy? What are we doing for PBIS? So to give an example to your point, if we were going to upgrade all of our HVAC systems, that would not happen without going through our discussion, and I'm not saying we're doing that. That's just an item that is allowable here. That would not be approved without the school board being involved in it and absolutely having the final say. So in terms of our budgeting process and our plan for this, it would go through just like anything else. And as we begin to put together our solid early literacy plan and PBIS plan and doing our long-range facility planning and really digging in as our students come back and finding out what is the lost learning needs that they have or unfinished learning, that's when we're going to begin to put in those programs in a systemic way that we're going to be able to spend those dollars in the appropriate way to help our students. So they're kind of two separate things. If we are going to be purchasing anything, utilizing these dollars, it will absolutely come before the school board and run through our process.
Director Hayes.
Superintendent Snackloff, would that be everything or just the $50,000 threshold?
That's a very good question. And so as I'm thinking about our system and purchasing, like I don't think you would want me to come with latex gloves. So that might be beneficial for us to develop. And as we move forward, we absolutely have to have a line item budget. We have to have a direction that we're going. But up until this point, there's been a lack of a plan to move forward. I know that's been very frustrating, but I feel very confident about the plan that we're developing for early literacy, PBIS, and I'm starting to see it develop for unfinished learning. We have some holes. When you talked about earlier, there's 6 hours, 20 minutes in a day. That's not going to get it done. It's not. So what does it look like in the current system that we have with the resources available to build that? We have people looking at that. What is that going to do? And so I think that needs to be developed and communicated. That's excellent feedback. Thank you, Vice President.
Did you have anything else? Director Beck.
I have a couple comments, I guess. I am sort of a slightly different mindset in that if I think of things that are not ongoing programs, I think of maybe this is an opportunity for seed money to jumpstart something. Especially if it's a program that's front loaded. So I guess I'm not going to right off the bat eliminate all of those potential uses of resources, but I would say I agree with Director Potts. If we're going to use this to purchase physical things or even connectivity and software and things like that, it should be with the plan that this is something that's going to be in use for more than just the next couple years, something that will last for a normal review cycle, right? 6 years or something like that. To maximize our ability to spend this, maximize our use of this money. That being said, I feel kind of like our hands are tied in terms of the prevention and mitigation strategies, because what I think we need to spend time and money on is things that we're not allowed to do. So, I'd say don't waste a ton of money on wipes, because we know that doesn't make a huge difference, but spend money on things that can help distance students, because we know it doesn't matter what disease it is, distance is going to help people not get sick. So, if we think long-term like that, we can build it into our long-range planning, and we can think about, the seasonal flu and the common cold and things that otherwise would normally, the stomach bug that gets kids out of the classroom. Otherwise, things that would normally lead to, missing school days.
Thank you. Director Poston, did you have something?
I understand what you're saying as far as checking everything, but I surely would not want the money to go towards, and I'm just, for an example, just under number 5, the first 2 items there. We've already done that. That's in place. So why, are we're going to spend money towards that, or are we going to spend money towards early literacy? So I just want to be sure that, even if you check all these, that's not where I want the money to go to.
That understood, and I appreciate that fact.
Director Klein-Jerome.
And I agree with Kent. There's things on here that it's like I would not want to see us spending money on that. The lost learning or the makeup learning, or however we're addressing it. If we're going to put a big focus on early literacy, I want to see 4th through 12th graders addressed, because they also need support in whatever form that comes.
Director Potts, did you have anything else? Superintendent Schneckler.
So can I propose putting together on this item what we would and wouldn't, and then discuss that on the 9th and vote on it, very similar to our legislative priorities? Or are you okay with me moving forward?
Mr. President,
Director Potts.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My microphone was off when you called on me. Let me flesh out what I was saying earlier. When I was thinking about, when I was talking about lost learning, when I was at Sudlow, we had a significant number of kids in band and orchestra that were free lunch kids. And when you talk about lost learning, they lost their school band and orchestra lessons for a year or more. And, kids that are participating in extracurricular, co-curricular activities bond with their school. They become involved in opportunities at school, and they do better. And so when I'm talking about those lost learning opportunities, I'm thinking about those, in particular, those students. So if we can use some of this money to help them catch up in those areas, I think it would be very beneficial for them.
Thank you, Director Potts. Mr. Superintendent, you had something else you wanted to add?
Nope, that was it. So the direction from the school board, I guess, is if we would like to bring forward, I could actually put together what we, all of the bullets on here, a recommendation of what we would and wouldn't select, and then have discussion on the 9th, or I can move forward with selecting the ones that we are that are absolutely aligned to what we're doing: health and safety, early literacy, PBIS, and just kind of review that with the board and move forward.
Are you gonna say how you would like it? All right. Well, hold on. I'll call on everyone individually and see where you're at. Director Potts, which way would you like to do this for next Monday?
What was your question?
So I could put together, from the feedback that I've heard tonight, go through, look at all the bullets, find the ones that are associated with lost learning, health and safety, PBIS, and early literacy, and click those, and then have the board review it and vote on it on the 9th.
I'm fine with that.
Or your other options?
I think I'm kind of getting the feedback that that's
Okay,
what the board
okay.
would like to do. Is that accurate?
Where are you at, Director Beck?
I guess I don't want to spend a lot of time hashing out things that we've already talked about. We have our focus on early literacy. We have our focus on PBIS. So I don't want to spend time discussing the same things that we've already discussed. But I do appreciate, the opportunity to say, yes, I agree with the things that you've chosen. So in that generic sense of pick things that we, as Director Poston said, things that we haven't already done, because if we've already done it and the ship sailed, it's not worth spending money on. And then the things that are definitely aligned with what we're
Okay.
doing.
So what if I put it as an action item, and I'll try and capture the feedback that's given so far, and if board members see that it looks good, we'll vote it. If not, we'll have discussion on it. I want to take this off, add this. That way, if the feedback is there, it can be voted on. And if we're still questioning something, it can be discussed, changed, and then voted on in that same meeting. Does that sound appropriate, President Goza?
It looks like we got a consensus here, so I think
Okay.
we can go that way.
Thank you.
Was there any more on that?
No, thank you for the feedback, and I appreciate it.
All right. Now we're almost done. Key takeaways, and I will start with Director Potts.
You are so kind. Let me say, I think one of the key takeaways tonight was the presentation we had on the literacy program. And the key point for me was the sharp and pointed questions that our board members asked about the program and the plan. I think that was very important. It shows to me that the board has moved up to a higher level of involvement and inquiry. I was impressed.
Thank you, Director Potts. Director Poston.
Well, I just like to thank the ladies that made the presentation on early literacy. We hit them with a lot of questions, and they did a good job of answering the questions. I think this is such an important issue for our, not only for our district, but for our community. And so I appreciate their presentation and all the work that the rest of the staff has put into this.
Thank you, Director Klein Jerome.
I also appreciated the early literacy plan, and I also think as a board we conveyed to them, don't come to us in 3 years and say, oh, there's a gap in what this is, that we are serious, this better be the right program, and in the future, every program we adopt, don't say, well, we knew there was a gap, and then we move forward, that we're buying what we need without the gaps in it, and I think that's clear moving forward. So I think that was good.
Thank you, Director Hayes.
I like the early literacy presentation. I think we all did, but I also like, I always enjoy the workshops when we can all kind of come together and voice our opinions and actually learn something from the ISB.
Thank you, Director Beck.
I appreciated the early literacy presentation. It demonstrates sort of what we've been trying to model and we've been talking about for the last year with all of our workshops is, you know, here's our goal, here's a plan to implement and reach that goal, and, you know, the questions that we're prepared to answer, the questions that we know you're going to ask. And so the presentation was informative, it was clear, it had a lot of information in it. Everything was linked out that actually worked, and I really appreciated that. And they handled our questions very well. And I also appreciated their willingness to take our feedback in terms of what we thought would help in the future, or, you know, things that in the past have not worked as well. So I am happy. I really appreciated that. And I also liked the workshop too. But
Superintendent.
The workshop was fantastic. There's an underlying theme, and I am so energized by it because I see it. I see it changing. I see. You heard tonight examples of silo. You heard tonight examples of, well, we don't have a say in things. Anybody that's been associated with this district knows that there's a disconnect between the teachers and how information flows. I heard a board that's very connected to that and asking very clear questions. And I heard an administration responding to that. Well, let's build a system that incorporates that voice, because there's no other way that we're going to get to the results that we have if from our paraeducators, our secretaries, our teachers, our principals, and central office staff aren't all rowing in the same direction. And that is a hard system to do, but it's the right way to do it. And it takes longer. It takes more time. But I see questioning lining in the right direction. I see administrators, central office, listening to that feedback, and we're moving in the right direction. And I'm very energized by that. What I see coming from our new cabinet is exciting. It's energizing. I'm very optimistic by what I heard tonight and what I saw. There's no silver bullet or anything like that, but through collaboration, through asking the right questions, I know that our leadership team and our teachers know that we're going to be held accountable by our school board. And that's a result of what's happened over the last 3 to 5 years. While that might not have been we might not be responsible for those actions, it's our responsibility to move forward. And that's what I'm hearing loud and clear. So I'm sorry for the lengthy part at 9:15, but I really felt that all meeting long. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I did enjoy the workshop. It was nice to see where we originally did one and then where we were at tonight. We were all pretty aligned. with what we're working on and the goals and stuff like that. So that's always good. The early literacy presentation, I greatly appreciate that and all the work that went into that. And I do apologize for cutting off the questions until the end, but sometimes I think when we do that, we get sidetracked away from it, and we need to get that part of it done because they might answer some of the questions, and then that way we have a lot better discussion at the end. So I do apologize, Director Klein-Jerome, for kind of cutting you off mid-sentence because I know I'm going to hear about it later. So, but publicly I apologize. So I think it went pretty good. All in all, again, I'm huge on plans. I loved it. They came. This is what we want to do. Here's the plan. I am a little disappointed they didn't include the teachers, but I believe they took that feedback because it's very hard to not include someone that you're going to put the majority, the bulk of the task on. It's very hard to do that. That would be like me in my day-to-day job saying, hey, go out and cover that pipe or do something that I wouldn't do and didn't know how. Not saying they don't know how to do it, but it's just, you're going to do all this because I expect this of you, but I'm not going to ask for any of your input. And I think that's where we get a huge disconnect between our administration and all of our support staff. And I think you did a great job saying what you had said about that. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Oh boy, I did that one right on the recorder.